Playoffs are in full swing, and we're jumping off the bat this week on the Indy Ball Report podcast. All right, we are back again, episode number 235 of the Indy Ball Report podcast. I'm Nick, Ryan's here, and I'm realizing now when I wrote down the episode number in my notes, I wrote down 135, which is considerably different than 235.
The math checks out. Yeah, man, pretty wild. Sorry, I was just distracted. That Kona Quigley home run just landed in my backyard.
Yeah, that was a pretty wild home run to end off game one. It's been a
good Lord. What a way to get it going in the Frontier.
Really, though. Like, Evansville's been on one lately.
Yeah, like, keeping it dramatic, keeping it exciting. I don't even know what to make of it. I was so focused on racing the weather with the Jersey game and watching that, and I flip over and it's just mid chaos. And Evansville did everything they could to lose this. And since you're listening to this, we're talking game one of Evansville and Gateway tonight. And Evansville walked it off with just a massive shot off Kona Quigley's bat. But Evansville, man, massive mistake base running, which would have been, the eighth inning, nobody out.
Yeah, I think, there's two mistakes with that, to be quite honest with you. But, yeah.
Yeah. What was the other one? I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. I might have been on the other game.
The first one was really Rosario going down to second on the steal, but they got away with it,
Right, yes.
Yeah, and then there was actually the next pitch where Myers gets the base hit. They try to score Rosario from second. He's gunned by a mile.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that. And then there was the second caught stealing where Meyer tried to advance to second on a steal, and he was gunned out by a mile. So a series of poor base running. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just bad situational awareness, I felt like, all around there. Knowing the situation, there was nobody out on that play at the plate, and he was out by 15 feet, I would say.
Yeah. I will say there wasn't a great tag that got put down, but even with a bad tag, he was still out by like a solid 3-4 feet.
Yeah, it was. The catcher was waiting for him. It was one of those.
Yeah.
Hell, it was to the point where I half expected him to get into a rundown and try to force a throw or something. He was that far out still.
Which honestly, the rundown would have, if he was able to do that, would have been better. He probably could have gotten Myers to second during the rundown.
No, yeah, you might. Honestly, yeah. There was, I could not believe, it took so long that the ball followed the catcher. The ball reached the catcher, the camera followed the ball, so it was looking at the catcher. And the only reason I knew somebody was running home was because the broadcaster was saying it. That's how far out he was. It's bizarre. But anyway, It worked out. They got away with one. That's how you get it done in the playoffs, is not letting your mistakes burn you and cooking up everyone else's mistakes, which they definitely did.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be an ongoing thing when we get into the actual playoff discussion this week, where it's just one bad inning cost, 3 or 4 teams, realistically, a game, or in, I guess, the case of Sussex, a series.
But that's also running into that buzzsaw that was Tavares. We saw it in person. I think that was crazy.
It was a clinic.
It felt like Sussex was flat, right?
Yeah.
But as I thought about it more, I think it was a little hard on them, watching the game. But maybe it's just credit to Tavares. And sorry for the quick change of what we're talking about here, but that game, we saw him. He struck out the first 6 batters he faced. I think he struck out 8 in the first 3 innings, and he went about it guys were working counts, but all it was, they went up there all right, I'm not going to just swing away. And then all of a sudden they were down 0-2. And, then they were behind so they had to start swinging the bat. And then that's where at bats start to feel lazy when, that's where it starts to get that, are we phoning it in type of feel when, you've struck out, I think 10 times for the first 4 innings or 5 innings. And you're like, okay, this isn't working. We got to get back to the ball. So you just start throwing the bat out there and trying to at least get the ball in play. And Jersey's defense looks really good, which is not always the case for them. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'm just in my head. I'm like, maybe I can't. Part of me is critical of them. Like, wow, they really came out flat in that single elimination playoff game. The other part of me is like, what else could they have done? Like,
fair.
It's just they got beat.
Yeah, I mean, like we'll go into more detail on it in a bit, but yeah, I mean, I also kind of gotta say, even though Tavares did go the distance on it, I still gotta have more than 4 base runners in one game when it's a wild card winner take all game. You can't have 4, no matter how good a pitcher is. You need to do something. Especially, like you said, like he struck out the side for the first 2 innings? Or was it the first 3?
Yes.
Yeah, first 2, okay. So he's throwing pitches.
I mean, he allowed a base runner too, I think, in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's another one with Tavares. He does a great job. He throws strikes, man. And that's a big thing. I mean, I can tell you that firsthand. If anybody out there is looking to make a deal with PJ Phillips, if you have a guy with a low walk rate, I'll probably take him. Because that's the first question anytime I send him a guy is like, what's the walk rate?
Which,
and
yep.
that play at the plate that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I was doing a deep dive over here while we were chatting. I was, first of all, Frontier League, I'm begging you to start tracking what positions guys are playing. That's all you need. You have all the fielding stats right on the site. I just need to know where they're playing. Anyway, but based on my math, I was like, is Jarvis Richards, like, his arm hasn't stood out in my mind. Like, is his arm that good? First of all, yeah, his fielding is good. And he has got I think he's tied for the 6th most outfield assists in the league.
Huh.
And which, by the way, you got to know that before you send my guy. But additionally, do you know who number 1 in outfield assist is?
I do not.
That would be the very man who ended tonight's game, Kona Quiggle.
Really?
Yes, sir.
That is interesting.
Yep.
Which also with Jerry is too. He's fast, so he's going to close on a ball quicker.
Yeah, right?
Like,
see, Quiggle's been playing some first base, though. I'm not going to give Quiggle that credit, by the way. I'm not giving him that. So I would bump that whole thing up to he's got like the 5th most outfield assists now. So good for him. Yeah. But again, that's why I need the Frontier League to help me out a little bit.
Yeah, either way, he's a top 10 fielder in the league with 16 teams? So,
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So like,
got to be aware. You're in a playoff series.
Yeah. There's 50 starting outfielders. This dude's in the top 10% of them. So
yeah,
maybe you don't run on him. That's just a decision.
Maybe head on a swivel out there, huh?
Exactly.
Nobody out. Come on now.
And that's the thing. Like, this is like, honestly, it's not on Rosario because he's just looking at his third base coach. And if his third base coach is sending him, he's running.
That's exactly it.
Because I don't think we have an angle, and maybe someone that was there can say, but I have to imagine third base coach was sending him. It's one thing if he runs through a sign. If he runs through the stop sign, I mean, then that's entirely on him. But I can't imagine he would have done that. I mean, that would be...
Yeah, I don't think he did. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't get a good... There wasn't a replay shown of it. Thanks, Flow Sports. I know they don't run the broadcast, but still, $30 a month. Anyway. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't assume, but...
Yeah.
I mean, he was just feeling himself, and he got over the second in a sketchy manner.
Yeah, but then you got to think, though, as a player, too, like, okay, this was a 50-50 ball. We kind of got away with one here. Because immediately that second baseman was like, I got him. I know he did. And Brooks shot out of that dugout. So, like...
True.
You got to be like, okay, if there's another 50-50, we're not getting it. Even if it's like a 60-40, we're not getting it. It's got to be pretty clear cut for us to get this one. So, like, you're like, yeah, I think I can run on him. I could beat him. And, like, there's one thing in having confidence, and there's another thing in just being stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were pretty much straddling on that line, huh?
Yeah. But,
rounding out the conversation about that throw, looks like most outfield assists belong to G.J. Hill. 21 looks like assists, and the next closest... It's not 21. I'll say that. I think it was 13. So he's got a pretty good gap out there.
Yeah, he's padded his cushion. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if a couple of random ones. Like, all it takes is one day playing infield to, like, ruin that. And, of course, it's hard to tell on Frontier League, but interesting. Also, second behind him is Justin Gideon, who, if you want a weird Indy Ball career, Justin Gideon's your guy.
Yeah.
Canadian popped up on the Melbourne Aces. That is, like, his lone professional experience, as far as I can tell. And now he's just, like, getting after it in Quebec right now for a really good team.
That honestly makes a lot of sense for some reason, but
vibey.
Yeah.
See, it seems like a Scalabrini find.
He does, which final point on this. So Jarvis Richards, obviously first, stolen bases, 75. Second, Rosario with 51.
How about that?
Yeah. Obviously, large gap there, but.
Yep. But still, man, it's a lot of bags.
Yeah, arguably two of the fastest in the league. So, like, I kind of understand, like, why you're like, yeah, we can
gambling on it. Yeah. And look, like, we're harping on this too much for something that didn't actually affect the game. Like, I mean, you know, in the end, but
especially because we're going to talk about this game in an hour.
You're going that aggressive, and like, you get to second, like in your head, you're like, if this ball's on the ground, in the outfield, like I'm getting there, like I'm tying this game up. Like I could see that decision almost being made already. Like I get that, but it's also like, still got to know who's out there, man. And that was not a deep ball, obviously, too. So anyway, we'll move on. We've beat this to death a little bit.
Final point: third base coach got to hold him there. Don't make the out at home. Don't run yourself out of an inning. But
yeah, man, I'm winning a second angle on that one. See what happens.
Yeah. Any case, just to circle back to one thing we started with when I said I wrote down 135. I looked up just out of strict curiosity what was episode 135. And here are the people on that episode, by the way, because we had a guest that week. It was me, Will, and then the other guy that's currently on this show.
Hey, squad.
Yeah.
Is that my first time on?
It very well could be. It was October 9th. It came out, 2021. And the description is, the guys welcome Ryan, ALPB Roundup, onto the show to talk about the Atlantic League and the final playoff push. Likewise.
Yep, definitely my first one. I had so many notes. I was not sure what I was getting into.
Yeah, see, you thought this was a lot more serious than it was. We also talked about
I won't even show up sober at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you do, I quite frankly don't even know what to do. Like, you're coherent, you got good points. I was like, well, shit, I wasn't ready for that. Terrible.
We can never have this guy back.
Exactly. He's making me look bad. This is a problem.
Yeah.
So, naturally, the most organic segue would be immediately talking about Gastonia.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
Yeah, they're on their usual BS. We'll be quick about the news because there's actual baseball to talk about. I think people would rather hear about actual baseball talk than any other news that, quite frankly, 3 weeks from now, we're going to really get into. So,
okay, I can vibe with that.
Yeah, so we'll be quick about it. Gastonia, supposedly they're missing staff payments again. And apparently they had some issue with staff not showing up, presumably because they weren't paid over the weekend. Some PA announcements not being made. So yeah, this is your story.
The highlights kind of include, well, I mean, the highlights include, I've heard, and it's been tough because I'm hearing a lot of different things, and it's becoming obvious that like they're just handling whatever is a bigger fire at the same, like at any given time.
Yeah.
Just surviving day to day, like not surviving as in like just the business trying to get by, like surviving, just trying not to get called out on their BS.
Yeah. They're doing cover up work.
Some of the full-time staff I talk to, they're like, no, like I got my paycheck on time. Some of them that I talk to are like, I am 7 days late on a paycheck. Others are like, they're late by a couple days, and also like the police recently didn't get paid again. Meanwhile, the PA thing, the weird PA announcement thing was a weird day. Something was up that day because like the gates weren't unlocked normally. Like everything was very late. Like, right before the game, it was almost like they were like, all right, let's host a game today. Like it was just a very much a mess. And then in the beginning of the game, there were less announcements and ad reads than usual.
Okay.
So like everyone was kind of like, what is happening? But then they kind of picked it up as the game went on and got back sort of the normal routine. So immediately all those things coming together in the same day, like flagged, like, something might be up. First of the month, everyone's wondering if something's up. The website, that's right. That wasn't renewed to start the month. It was just a disaster of things at one time, but the ads did come back through eventually. It's just sketchy. And then there's today, and I don't have the update on it yet, but I'm sure I'll watch a very boring local government live stream of a discussion on a proposal to basically repurpose the land around, like rezone the land around the ballpark, which is stuff owned by Fuse and Brandon Bellamy, for residential usage. So I guess doing some sort of condos. And, I mean, I've talked about it before. I don't know. One, I think it's going to be interesting with the mess that there is, because there are certainly people who would need to sign off on that who are not happy with Brandon Bellamy, the owner of the team. On the other side, I'm fairly comfortable saying at this point that he has a relationship with the mayor in some form that predates him owning this team in Gastonia, so they were friends beforehand, it seems. So there is that weight pushing in favor of him getting this, zoning change done. But my biggest thing on the baseball side, how this actually relates back to baseball, is from the potential owners I have spoken with who would be interested in a team like Gastonia, the holdup for them when it came to making a good substantial bid for the team was, or an offer for the team, was the fact that the land would not come with it because Brandon Bellamy wanted to keep it. And the way that stadium is set up, the ballpark is set up, it really limits your options and your resource, like your potential income sources, to not have the land around it, because it limits the way you can do the parking. You are basically held to just what you can host in the ballpark, which is a smaller ballpark.
By design, by the way. Yep.
Yes, exactly. So it's just, it's definitely going to be a holdup if it comes now to trying to sell the team while he's also still trying to hang on to that land. So that was the big thing that sort of caught me.
So the first immediate thought I had, particularly just to backtrack to the ad read point and just the day being off, it very much, and of course this is going to be more speculation because I don't know anything about it, but it almost feels like the essential game day staff either weren't paid or were being paid late, or something happened with them, and there was almost like an agreement amongst them to say, all right, for the first 3 innings of this game, we're going to drag our feet on it. We're not going to do things, as we usually do to make a point. It almost like I hate to say it, like the reverse boycott, because those situations are completely different, but something along those lines where it's more like, okay, we're making a point here, pay attention to it. And it wasn't until the point got made that then whomever would be to have the kind of authority to say, all right, we'll address what you're saying, or we'll prioritize your pay, or whatever it may be. Now, of course, you do this on what? It was the first or the second? First, because we recorded early that
something
day.
Like that.
Yeah, it was the first, because I remember we recorded at like noon. The one time we record early, all this stuff happens.
Life.
But really. Yeah, so like you do that on the first when your season ends on the 17th. It's like, okay, well, maybe not as much authority when you have like 1, maybe 2 paychecks coming through. So, not really holding the same kind of weight, but whatever. So it kind of felt like some sort of organized protest to me. Now, maybe I'm off base there, but it does kind of feel that way. That said, bringing it back to the point, as far as ownership goes, it makes a lot of sense there. I mean, it almost feels like to me where the ballpark strategy was go for the ballpark to get the land, and then like 10, 15 years, we'll redevelop the ballpark itself into something else. It almost feels like that was kind of like the plan from the get-go to me, by the way everything's going.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like the buildings that they're talking about do show up in the like original mock-ups for the ballpark area, so that's not a surprise. I think the surprise would be that, oh, you're still going for it, okay, which, part of you is like, well, obviously, it's the only thing that has potential to work apparently over there.
Yeah.
But the other side is like, there's a popular thought that he was trying to get out, and it's very odd that Bellamy, no, it's not odd, it's just telling, I guess, where this thing is going. My main concern is, I think at this point it's a better than 50-50 shot that unfortunately we see Gastonia playing something like summer ball within the next year or two. I think if they're in the Atlantic League next year, it's because the Atlantic League needs them to balance the schedule, and that's it.
I mean, it would make sense, and
I mean, they're paying for their players right now. Like, there's no way the Atlantic League is excited to have him back, like this current ownership.
Yeah, and with the negative press it brings, it's not like that's a big draw. We know we're going to get into some other Atlantic League team rostering issues. It does make a lot of sense. That market worked in the past. We've discussed off air why that market worked in the past for, summer college ball. That has more to do with ownership, but it does make a lot of sense for them to switch somewhere else. And like we've discussed before, and you make the great point always, what other league are they going to go to? It's pretty much Atlantic League or non-professional. Those are the options.
Yeah.
So in that kind of scenario, they have to drop down. And it's a shame too, because as far as the baseball side of things goes, just on the field and roster construction, it's a good team. Like, they're doing really well. And especially when you have a lot of all these off the field issues going on, it makes it even more impressive what the players are able to do. And obviously now that they are actually getting a consistent paycheck, that's got to be a nice weight off of you that you don't have to worry about anymore. But even regardless of that, it's still a lot of noise going around. So you applaud the players and the staff for dealing with it, but to lose or to have those people responsible for building and constructing that team on the field, have them lose their job is unfortunate. But that being said, I think the body of work speaks well enough to where if they want to hold a similar position, there's going to be teams that are going to be calling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think probably teams already are, if we're talking about the same people.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's a weird one too, where I'm like, at this point, I dislike the ownership group so much that I'm like, fail. I hate you, fail. But I'm also like, that does not help, one, the sport, or two, the market and the people who live in that community. So it's like, I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about it.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure if I'm sort of almost sitting back, especially considering how much I've done on the topic. It's just because I'm so deep on the topic now that I don't even know how to feel necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I mean, this was a market that had potential to work, especially with everything that's, been done. It's just a matter of, it's been horribly mismanaged at this point. So wanting to get the people that are the chief responsible for mismanagement out is, a natural reaction, honestly, the right one to have. And the obvious counterpoint, though, is if it fails in a certain way, it's going to deter anybody else from trying it. And it's going to cost, a lot of people their job, their position. But at the same point in time, if they're not even being paid consistently, I don't really think they're that upset if they lose it, because at least then they can have closure and close the book on it and move on to something else. Because, I mean, how many people are going to want to continue there next year and the years going forward under this current ownership group, right? Like, if you know these kinds of problems exist, it's really hard to say, yeah, I'm going to be dealing with that again. That's a good decision there. Like, it's not a positive one. And we've seen how many other times throughout even the recent past in Indy Ball, teams just being locked out mid-year. Obviously, it's a different situation. He owns his ballpark. He ain't getting locked out. But would it be that shocking if one day you just show up to the ballpark and everything's gone? There's just not enough money around. Yeah. So, like, if that's a realistic concern, if you have any desire in building a career, you don't really want to have that as your foundation. And honestly, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I'm thinking for all the work that, especially as of recent, has gone in to building the image of independent ball and trying to erase the stereotype and the common conception of just being some side league that's a step above, YMCA ball, and turn around and have this, it's like, well, you're really undoing a lot of the progress. So the sooner we can get this matter sorted one way or the other, at this point, whatever the outcome is, I'm cool with it.
Yeah. Part of, as somebody who is like personally invested in Indy Ball as a fan, as somebody who, does Indy Ball Nation, as somebody who would love to be working in Indy Ball again and sometime potentially in the near future, I not only am somebody who, like, I'm the type of person who will watch an MLB game, and if I don't have, like, if the Phillies aren't playing, like, I'm rooting for, like, what is best for baseball, typically. I'm rooting for the team where, like, it's better for the game if they win. I feel very much that way about Indy Ball, and that is why it's so frustrating to me whenever it's bad ownership. And like, I have been called out before for, like, really jumping on messy decisions. Like, you and I both got a ton of blowback for the Southern Maryland thing last year when they set the field on fire. And I said over and over again, because people are like, yes, but it has, like, literally setting the field on fire when it's too wet has actually worked. And my response was always, that's cool. It's a bad look.
Mm-hmm.
And I preach all the time, and this is getting so far away from baseball considering it's a playoff week that we should steer back soon.
Yeah.
But to land the plane a little bit here, I practically preach it like Indy Ball teams need to understand where they are, and so do the leagues, in a positive light of, the opportunity that comes with that, the freedom to, get creative on things. You don't have to answer to really anybody. Like, as long as you can play within some rules, you're good to go. The opportunity to like embrace playing to win, not just playing to develop, all that stuff. But on the other side, you need to understand the general feeling a lot of baseball people have. First of all, non-baseball people are not going to understand what Indy Ball is. Yeah. So you better make a good impression on them any opportunity you can. Baseball people are already very much coming in with the mentality of, oh, this is sort of amateurish ball. This is, the way Trenton, I would say, feels about them.
Yeah.
About Indy Ball. So by doing things that sort of back that idea up, you're hurting everybody. Because now, say I'm me living in Gastonia right now without my pre-existing relationship to Indy Ball. There was a summer ball team that did well there. Then an Indy Ball team comes in and it's a garbage fire. They can't run it. They can't make money. People aren't getting paid. It's a disaster, and they're probably going to disappear like on everybody, broken promises, whatever. And when, you might have heard that like that has been a thing that has plagued Indy Ball at times. When now say that I'm a baseball fan, I'm a baseball guy, I go to maybe I move somewhere a few years later. Either there's a local Indy Ball team that I'm like, that's amateur, I don't need to be involved. Or even like, say if you're somebody who's involved in like local government and now you might go somewhere else, you move on through life. But when it comes down to it, maybe an Indy Ball league wants to put a team in your market 20 years from now. And your experience is what you just had with this organization who was a mess, and you represented everyone poorly and left a bad taste. And that's the story you're going to tell. It's like, I don't know, it could have changed, but it was a disaster when I was there. They're unprofessional. Like, there's a very limited window to make an impression when you are in unaffiliated sports. And just like the players seem to be able to capitalize on the opportunities when they give them, like, teams and organizations and leagues do as well. It's just so frustrating to see this kind of thing. And it even extends out to these teams that can't get their damn lease right. It extends to the Jackals, who don't even have a home field in the playoff right now. That extends to whatever the hell's going on with Sioux City right now. Like, all those teams that are having these kind of issues. Like, I understand some things are out of your control, but like, you need to go about things with the understanding that when it's this niche of a group, the things you do represent everybody.
Yeah, it's interconnected. It goes back to the stereotype point, which all the teams you mentioned, they're all playoff teams. They're all now.
Yeah.
As far as product on the field goes, it's
some of the best, man.
Exactly. And it's like high quality players. And like, we'll talk about awards in just a second. That's the next thing up here. And one of the things I kept seeing from everyone online was that's a surprising decision for third baseman postseason all-star. And one of the ones everyone kept saying was, where's Matt Lloyd for Sioux City? And that's an example of a really good player. Stayed the whole year. Could be promoting that. Could be going with that. But instead, the year before, we're fighting over a seating in a ballpark. And then we turn around and now we are at the point where you just didn't get the automatic renew on the lease. Now you got to go and petition for it. But yeah, it's a niche thing. It's whatever the top Google result is. That's what most people know about it. Mm-hmm. The common person, they don't really care. It's minor league baseball. So what's the difference? The only real difference is you don't have a major league affiliate backing. So you're not able to slap a Cubs logo on. You're not able to slap a Yankees logo on, a Dodgers logo on. So you don't have that backing. You don't have a well-known major league face doing rehab down there. And so if you're assuming the average person is just going for the night out, which is, what the average person is going to do, you have to make that experience different and better. Especially if you're in an area like Gastonia is, where there's other options. There's other baseball options. So
yes, that's a great point.
Like, you have a AAA team in your backyard. And you're a borderline.
Hell of a good one.
Yeah. And right now, what's one of the top markets for MLB expansion that keeps getting thrown around? Mm-hmm. It's Charlotte. Yep. So if you're going to have that right next door, What are you doing to be different? And really, there's two paths you could take. The one path, which the first thing I heard of when you said, when you just got to play within a few rules, but by and large, you're free to do what you want. The immediate thing I thought of was, they're more guidelines than they are actual rules, which is, you're essentially a pirate. There's a few things you're not allowed to do, but by and large, if you can think of it, and it's legal, and it makes sense financially, you can do it. You may get a little bit of pushback at the league office level, but by and large, you can do what you want. Look at St. Paul. For so many years, they were pushing the envelope with what they were doing. Were there times they definitely got a phone call like, what are you guys doing? Almost certainly. But at the same point in time, it worked. It worked out really well for them. And so you could take that route where you're different and you stand out and you do kind of outrageous things and you attract that kind of crowd that kind of wants to go for spectacle. Or you could take the flip side, which is more of the Long Island route, which is you run your organization as you would, I hate to say a major league thing because it's a vastly different economic scale and it's vastly different in a lot of different ways. But the mentality is essentially the same, where it's every year our goal is to go out there and put out a team that we feel is confident to, if not win a title, contend. We expect to play competitive baseball for the vast majority of the year. Now, the second half of this year, I don't know if I call that competitive, but that could also just be sandbagging, getting ready for the postseason, which seeing teams do that before, not necessarily the worst decision. If you can flip the switch, that's a different conversation. But you can run it that way, where it's like, I know I'm going to see a good product. I know I'm going to have a family-friendly, good time. I'm going to enjoy my experience there. I know what I'm going to get, and it's going to be a good time. And it's definitely worked out very well for Long Island. I'd argue Somerset ran the same way. And so you look at all these different examples, and even if you're selfishly saying Indy Ball isn't exactly where we want to be affiliated. If we go back to, again, the Gastonia example, you have a brand new ballpark that very well could either be high A or double A. If you ran your ship correctly and you had everything done up to the nines, everybody's paid, it's a great relationship you have with the consumer community and the commercial community. You mean to tell me when an expansion team comes to town, they're not going to be interested in putting their double A boot where they can keep their eye on every grade A prospect they have and be able to really monitor and watch that development? And you're not going to be able to brand off of that? And then should that partnership fail at some point, you mean to tell me if you're running a good organization there, that the Orioles or the Nationals or the Braves or possibly another expansion team at a different point in time is not going to come calling and go, hey, would you like to sign the PDL with us? So I look at it from that perspective and just going, running the business a certain way, if you plan to own this thing for any duration of time, it's just the correct way of doing it. But to your point as to the game as a whole on the larger perspective, yeah, whenever stuff like this goes wrong, it looks bad on everybody. It makes it look amateurish and it plays back into the stereotype and, the old expectation of it's glorified men's league for guys that can't give it up. And the thing is, we have seen that's not the case. I mean, we've had almost 70 guys have their contracts purchased this year. So 70 guys got another shot at potentially being a major leaguer. In the case of Barraclaw and Marriott, they did get back to the majors. It's more than just that. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
To finish this out too, it's so much of it is perspective, controlling the perspective of others, and also understanding
controlling the message,
the perspective of yourself. Just from a personal side of things, I mean, hell, I found myself in a spot where I went from not working with a team to doing baseball operations for the Legends last year.
Yeah.
And they were right off a championship. Anybody who saw that team knows how good that 2021 team was. So
they were one of the best.
Talking to friends about it, right? Because my friends don't understand any ball, most people don't. So, I would be like, well, I'm running baseball operations for an Indy Ball team. And they're like, so what is that? And I eventually just said, screw it. I'm going to be my own cheerleader on this. And I said it, and I was like, yo, right now I'm helping build a roster on what last year was the best non-Major League Baseball team in the U.S. Fight me on it. I'm just saying, I would have taken that Legends team over a AAA team. That team was definitely I would say it's an outlier team, but like Indy Ball is capable at any given time of cranking out teams that could stomp all over any team that isn't a major league team. And it's just remembering like that's who we are. And like you can define that narrative. Like, you know, Lexington, of course, because they were a disaster with that ownership group, couldn't figure out what the hell to do with that. But like they literally went from mourning the loss of a single A team, not high A, single A team, and then brought in a team with former major leaguers on it for the best quality of baseball they've had ever there. And all you heard was people just like, oh, well, like, I don't know, it's like Indy Ball or whatever, isn't it? And I'm like, what? Like, but they've been there for a year getting it on like this. Like, it was just, there's a lot of markets like that where it's people, if you don't tell people who the hell you are and show them who the hell you are, they're going to make their own assumptions.
Goes back to marketing. Goes back to the controlling the message and the medium. And well, I know we got to move on, so we'll move on after I just get the one thought, which is when you fail to market correctly and you fail to understand the objective of your marketing, I feel like it speaks to the understanding and the objective of the organization as a whole, which is when you're a new team, particularly on the independent level, obviously, and I'm not saying profit isn't important. Obviously, profit is, pretty paramount. But the initial thing you got to be doing is saying, this is what we are. This is what we do. This is how we're different from regular affiliated ball, and hammering that in there and playing into, we're trying to give you an actual good product. Our main goal is serving you, not some higher power. And when you see the marketing shift to, I just want to sell as many tickets as we can, or just, it's whatever. If we have money left over, we'll market. If not, it's not that big of a deal. It kind of speaks to you don't quite understand the consumer base you're trying to get into your ballpark.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Let's talk about some player awards here.
All right.
Which is a really weird transition, but it's the one we're going to make.
It's fine.
Yep. So we got player awards for the Frontier American Association. We'll run through the American Association first. I'll admit, these are really disjointed the way they announce these. I don't like it at all. There's no even article on the website as of right now that lists them out. So we're probably going to drop a guy here or there. But yeah, it's hard to track, at least with the and even the Frontier wasn't great about it, to be quite honest, because like they listed 4 guys, I think, 3 or 4, 3. So not exactly great on their front, even though there's more than 3 awards. So yeah, wasn't a great job in releasing all of that. I'll have to go back through to see if I can't find a press release once I'm done reading through all these names here. But in any case, let's just jump right into the postseason team, and then we'll get into the awards from there. This is American Association up first, then we'll do Frontier. The American Association starting pitcher of the year, Solomon Bates. I'm going to assume that means he's also the pitcher of the year, but I mean, that may be an assumption that I shouldn't make.
I have no idea either.
Yeah, I think they did this last year too, even though it was pretty clearly going to be Matt Hall, even though I tried to make it be well, Kevin McGovern. So Solomon Bates, Sioux City's your starting pitcher of the year. Relief pitcher, Charlie Hasty from Sioux Falls. Catcher is going to be Chris Herman from Kansas City. Infield goes first baseman Mike Hart, Sioux Falls. Second baseman Brian Torres, Milwaukee. Third baseman, this one has some controversy around it, Dason Crows. He is from Winnipeg. This overlooks Jose Sermo and it overlooks Matt Lloyd, both guys that I saw some campaigning for online about. And when you look at the numbers, it is kind of okay, well, maybe those guys should have gotten the nod here, but whatever. Shortstop, Josh Altman. That one's pretty obvious. He's from Chicago. Outfielders are Hill Alexander and Zach Nerrier, both from Cleveland, and Max Murphy from Winnipeg. Utility man is Cam Valego from Milwaukee, and DH is Jabari Henry from Sioux Falls there. So realistically, they all seem pretty good. I would just say third base is a point of contention here, because quite frankly, I probably would have went Sermo in that spot.
I'm not going to get too deep into it. I've been really focused on the playoffs. If I'm honest, I was caught off guard by awards happening this week. I should pay more attention, but
Yeah, I thought they were coming a little bit later too.
Yeah, I've been kind of locked in on doing because we're right in that sweet spot of playoffs and also like the playoff chase in the other leagues. So I've been kind of focused on that. Plus, I'm going to be doing my own award thing, so I don't really care. Well, no, not that I don't care. I do actively kind of try not to just bias myself by seeing what other people are up to, because I could really affect myself either way, because I'm both someone who could get some confirmation bias going, but also someone who's like, oh, you picked him? I ain't doing that, because I'm the worst.
I mean, like, in fairness here, I expect your award show to have just like full on an actual show. I don't want just awards. There better be like.
That's my goal, honestly. I want this thing to be so over the top and dumb. It's probably going to come out like next July.
It better be the Oscars. That's my expectation. And secondly here, like in the case of Dason, I kind of get it. Let me give you his full line here. I'll pull it up real quick here. Rookie too. So that is a factor in it. He had 3 home runs, 67 RBIs, 41 walks to 36 strikeouts, 5 stolen bases, and he hit .351. The reason why I said I probably would have went Sermo there is why, yeah, he only played in 79 games, partially because he went to Mexico for a minute. He still had 28 bombs. And he had 77 RBIs, 51 walks, admittedly double that amount for strikeouts, so not great. 10 stolen bases, 273 batting average there, but overall, I just feel like that's a stronger resume than what Dason did. Plus, I also think of it like this. What Sermo did actually mattered. Not to say, Crow's season wasn't good or wasn't important to him. It certainly was. But at the end of the day, Winnipeg was the worst team or second worst team in the league? So, you could have put anyone on here. You could put Chris Herman on that team. It would not have mattered because that team was not going anywhere. While in the case of Sermo, that was a team that just got in. You could very well say, if Sermo doesn't have the season he has, then Cleburne's not in. I believe it was Lake Country that would have taken that final spot. And now it's a different outlook here for the whole playoff scheme. So I just point to Sermo as the guy like, yeah, he had more of an impact on the year. Now, if we're just comparing straight up, I could see how you could go and make the decision that was made. One has a more well-rounded season, so I get that. I understand that. But still, at the end of the day, I just kind of weigh the importance of the season a little bit more than the well-roundedness of it.
Yeah. Again, that's more into like the are we talking most valuable player? Or are we talking best player argument? Which is a different conversation.
I suppose it'd be best player in this case, to be honest.
I will selfishly hold my thoughts on this one until one, because again, I am being like, haha, I'll do my own thing, but also because I feel like I haven't had enough time to really like sit down and rank the players in my own mind right now. I've just been watching things as they chaotically happen for the last several months and just doing my best to not drown.
Fair enough. It's just one of those things. It was the only point of contention I really saw, so I wanted to just bring it up and make the argument for or against that. But yeah, moving on.
I will do neither. It's because I'm the worst.
Well, that's why you're here. Any case, we got 4 other awards in this league to get to before we can get to the Frontier League and then actually get into baseball discussion. Defensive Player of the Year is Sam Dexter from Fargo, the Twitterless Sam Dexter. I guess now it's the X-less Sam Dexter, captain of the Redhawks. Rookie Position Player of the Year, Dason Crows, as you can probably guess, Fargo again. Rookie Pitcher of the Year, Weston Meyer from Kane County. And then the Player of the Year was Chris Herman from Kansas City, who makes a lot of sense for that role. Also makes us fail on the one over-under from a few weeks back when we said the over-under for American Association MVP is going to be 26 home runs. Herman wound up finishing with 23 home runs. So the under
hate it.
Yeah. Ain't that something?
So I think we said, did we say under or say over? I think we said over, actually.
Yeah, we said over because at that point, like, we were looking at the situation. If I remember right, it was like Murphy was right up there. Altman wasn't that far behind. And Sermo was there too. And we were like, Max Murphy has a good case. I believe that's who we kind of were like, yeah, it's going to be Murph because of the story. And you looked at the stat line. It's like, this is a pretty stat line. And then I think I may have mentioned like maybe Herman, but I doubt it. The home runs really aren't there. But I was looking at that RBI number and the batting average. I was like, those are good, but I just don't know if they're good enough to overcome this. The thing was Murphy was close on both of them. So it was like, you know, like if you can overlook like a 12 to 20 point difference batting average wise, you know, Murphy matters more. And I guess because they go with, well, it's player of the year, not MVP. So that's the other thing too. Cause
I know. It's so difficult, man.
Cause like, no doubt Herman was more valuable to Kansas City than Murphy was to Winnipeg. We just went through this with Crows. But like overall season wise, it's like, well, I mean, I guess it comes down to the difference in home runs is easier to overlook than the difference in batting averages. Like, let me quickly just see what Murphy's batting average was at the end of the year. He finished the season batting, okay, it was 289. 289 to 355. Okay, that is a big difference. I didn't realize it was that big at first. What was Altman's at? Because like that's also important to me here.
True.
290. Okay, so same basic thing. Adds up now. Okay. And Herman was at the same amount of RBIs as Altman, more than Murphy. So yeah, I mean, like, honestly, now looking at the stat line here, I wouldn't be stunned. I think I mentioned this to you on Tuesday. Like, if Herman winds up being the Baseball America Player of the Year for Indy Ball, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I agree. I could definitely see him going that direction on that one as well. Yeah, specifically from the Baseball America side, I think they would like that because they also, I mean, I think of it this way: like they'll probably do a little article about it, and they have a better story to tell maybe with the comeback there.
Yeah, that also
and that's not saying he doesn't deserve it. I do think. I mean,
yeah, he has the better overall one. So. Like part of the reason behind it is, you know, it's either going to be the Atlantic League or the American Association Frontier League. For all you do, you just don't have that kind of guy, and the competition level is going to be a thing. Like, if there was to be anyone from the Frontier League, it would. I feel like Alfredo Marte would have the best case, and he'd still have to have one really good year. Mm-hmm. And it reminds me a lot of like the Jordani Valdespin year, where it's like a guy that's kind of known. You hear his name, you're like, oh yeah, he was in the majors. He had a really solid year on a good team. Probably a team that is going to win a championship, if not play for a championship. It checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
And there's no Atlantic League guy either that really jumps out at you.
Yeah, we went through that list. It's just there's no real standout like that this year.
Yeah.
And I see them being hesitant to me.
Or Cordero perhaps, but I mean, like, that's even a stretch.
So my weird thing was, I was like, yeah, I don't see him going to the Frontier League, but I'm like, well, I don't see a reason they wouldn't go for like a guy like Keon Barnum if he had the best numbers in the league. So like maybe a James Nelson would be in play. So that's where I start to wonder where maybe they would reach a little bit into that side, but I don't know. That's a whole different topic.
I mean, Barnum's also won the thing twice though. And he has kind of...
That was an example of like if Keon put up the numbers that say like James Nelson did this year, then I don't think they'd hesitate to give to Keon again because he has previously shown that he can do it at different levels and things like that. So sure, maybe the Frontier's a lower level, but still they know Keon Barnum's Keon Barnum.
Fair.
But with that, I was like, maybe it's not that much of a stretch to say that like a James Nelson could be in play if they wanted to. Baseball America does love a home run.
Fair. I just continuing with Keon Barnum. I know he's just an example here, but you look at Barnum's numbers, they're not that far off from Nelson because it's what, the 316 batting average to 388. I mean, 70 points plus. So I mean, like that is notable, yeah, but like RBIs wise, more there, same amount of home runs. So like, it's still not like it's a bad year. It's just like not nearly hitting 400. I mean, that's just the thing. Like for Nelson, and I guess we'll just move right to the Frontier League because Nelson was named MVP, which is a difference between Player of the Year and Most Valuable Player. Nelson basically was Tony Gwynn with power. So, you know, it's a difference there. I mean, to the point, I think I could see it, but I just think it's hard to overcome I just really think it's hard to overcome the Frontier League thing. If you have the track record to back it up, sure, but it's still, you look at the competition level and it's like you're going up against a lot of like first and second year pros. So that's a lot different than going up against guys that pitched, overseas or played in the majors or the double and triple A level for the majority of their career. When you're coming from like, NAIA ball, or you're playing for like some college in the middle of Nowhereville, Idaho. It's, a little bit different, right? Not to say they're not good players, but like, it's a lot different comparing that versus a dude that just pitched last year in Japan.
You're right. I can't argue with that. Actually, I have a pretty hard feeling about where all the different leagues stack up.
Yeah.
I guess my main point is I could see them going that direction, though I don't say that I would agree with it. So, yeah, I think you and I are on the same page.
So
all that to say, I think we agree.
Exactly. We definitely agree on that. And any thoughts on James Nelson being named MVP? I know you're going to do your own awards, but any real thoughts on that?
I actually do have some thoughts on that one. My initial thought seeing it was like, we just got our eyes on James Nelson, that Jackal team this week. Yeah. My initial thought was I like James Nelson. He had a good year, but I'm like, man, the Frontier League really didn't bother to like take into consideration the park being played in. But then, so I took it upon myself and I was like, well, let me run the numbers on Ballpark Factor, which for those of you not, baptized into the world of misery that is park factors and things like that. It's, does your ballpark benefit pitchers or hitters? And then you can apply that number to like kind of balance the stats out. So basically if a guy in a home run friendly park is hitting like 40 home runs, you can kind of apply, the park factor to that and get a sort of what would he do in an average ballpark type of thing. So yeah, I started pulling that apart and I was really surprised with what I found, because the thing that I stumbled into here was that, honestly, the Jackals ballpark, there's been a lot of talk about Hinchliffe and how hitter friendly it is because of the weird shape and the short fence, especially out in the right. But it was only the 6th most hitter friendly ballpark this season. Ballpark factor is best represented over a course of like 4 or 5 years, but I don't have that much data. Frontier League hit me up. And specifically, if I'm comparing Hinchliffe to others, it's only been around for a year, so I'm using what I got. But if ballpark factor, it uses just a 1 as like the middle ground from there. So anything above a 1 is hitter friendly, and anything below a 1 is increasingly pitcher friendly. And they were a 1.03, which shows that there were some weird things there. But I would say James Nelson certainly earned it with his number. Like his numbers are great, and I think he just had a hell of a year, and we shouldn't be taking away from it by pointing to the ballpark too much. And maybe that's just a lesson I had to learn. Nobody else needed it, but there it is.
Well, yeah, both were big on that.
What was that?
We were both big on the ballpark being a factor in it. That like, it's a hitter's ballpark. And so,
so that's kind of why I needed to see it. Yeah, I had to see it myself, and there are asterisks on that. As I said, like it's better measured over a number of years, but the weird one that I pointed out on Twitter earlier was that essentially the reason, like what you do for finding a ballpark factor is it's simple. You compare the number of runs scored, like in this example in Jackals games, the total number of runs scored at home versus away, and sort of how that compares like per game. And it was pretty even, but the thing that, I stumbled into was that it was even because weirdly the offense was much better at home at Hinchliffe, which you would expect.
Yeah.
But the pitching was much better on the road, like almost a full run better on the road. And that's where you start to balance things out. And so I do think probably there is some advantage. I think PJ Phillips put together a roster that like a lineup that knows how to pitch that knows how to hit in that ballpark. Powerful lefty hitters who can pull the ball. And I think that sort of affected the numbers as well. But I guess if somebody tells you that, all of the numbers coming from the Jackals this season should be viewed suspiciously? I would say, for the most part, no. I think that isn't the case. And for what's worth, James Nelson's a righty, so you can also shove that.
Yeah, I was just curious to see like how old he was, because like I feel like that was going to be a factor. He's only 25, so it's not like he's.
I know, right?
Yeah, he's not really old. So like,
yeah,
I was expecting like, oh well, he's a 27-year-old in this league, so it's like. So it'd be a little bit less impressive, but no. He's right in the range, like a little bit on the upper end of the range, but he's right in range.
And he, briefly, sure, small sample size, but he showed that he can do it last year in Lexington too at the Atlantic League level, because 17 games, hit 400 with 6 dingers in like 63 plate appearances. I mean, so if you're looking for a guy, man, James Nelson might be your solution.
Are we going to count that little bit of time in Somerset too? Is it 2 games there? Or?
Oh my God, it's so funny. I overlooked that. Well, no, that's Eastern League Somerset.
I know. Yeah, I see it. I see it for 22.
You will get no credit for that Somerset time. We don't know them anymore.
We don't know them. New phone. Who's this?
Lose my number.
You know who's?
I don't like who you affiliated with. Yeah,
which, in fairness, if your friends include the New York Yankees.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it wasn't a Yankee shot. It was just a shot at being affiliated because...
I mean, it works for both, though. I wouldn't want
to associate I'm happy. With them. I'm not complaining. It went well.
Yeah. But you know who we do want to be associated with?
Tell me.
The Frontier League's Pitcher of the Year, Cole Cook. Because he's the Frontier League Pitcher of the Year, along with Rookie of the Year, Noah Myers, who, as we've been discussing throughout this show, had himself a day. An adventurous day.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't really know where to go from that. It's just that's where we're at. So I guess Cole fits there, and I guess Noah does. I don't really have rookie stats in front of me, and it's hard to keep track of all the classifications throughout the year. So we'll go with Noah fitting that criteria. I mean, as an everyday player, he hit 322. Come on, load the rest of your stats. 322, 18 home runs, 58 RBIs. 41 stolen bases in 93 games. I mean, that's a very good year for anyone, much less a rookie. So respect that. And then as far as Cole Cook goes, very good year. He kind of flew under the radar because he was, in Joliet as part of one of the you're not god awful, but you're certainly not good teams. 223 for the ERA. 12 wins. Led the league. Second in strikeouts, which makes sense. He's a big strikeout guy. Honestly, really solid year from Cole. Good for him.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to be the troublemaker, I'll say what I know from my numbers is that he was pitching in the most pitcher-friendly ballpark.
Yeah, but his team sucked.
Yeah, fair enough.
Whip a 1, too.
Yeah. Let's think.
And in fairness, too, if you compare I
think he probably would have put up like a 2.6 ERA pitching an average ballpark, which is still,
Which, it's funny.
That's a year right there.
Yeah. So what's funny about that, if you combined his 22 number and 23 number for his ERA, it winds up being just a shade under 2.7.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a 269. So, and he lowered, just in case anyone was curious, he lowered that ERA by a total run. Overall, that's the awards. Only piece of news we really have left, and we're just going to touch on this briefly because it's still really developing. It's just something that someone here sent a tweet out about, so we're going to address it, which is Frontier League expansion, because we're going to toss that into the middle of a playoff episode too. Supposedly 4 new teams, new markets were going to be Montreal and Pawtucket, although, correct me if I'm wrong, Pawtucket looks to be a little bit more touch and go now, more on the not going to happen side of life. And then there's 2 other teams jumping in from the Atlantic League, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, none of this is official. This is all sort of still off of rumor. Nobody wants to go on the record with it. And, you never know even how, when that's the situation, you never know how up to date the info you're getting is. But I've been knocking on doors and trying to get some sort of additional info. But, yeah, so essentially what I'm hearing is there's multiple markets. What we know with some pretty good certainty is that, hell no, I'll say I know for a fact, is that teams are not happy with the travel situation in the Frontier League. Additionally, teams are not happy with the Empire State situation.
Understandable.
And continued use of the travel team. So that's a priority. That's becoming more of a priority. It seems to have been involved as well in agreeing with Tri-City for Tri-City to remain for 3 more years, I guess. I don't know if it was the terms of the contract. It could have been, but it might have just been expressed as a priority and something that's a priority at Tri-City because they mentioned it during the news reporting of the new deal to extend their time at the Frontier. So it's obviously pretty important to them, and that they seem representative of ownership of multiple teams based on who I've talked to. So the way to resolve both issues, the travel issues and the travel team issue, is to add, I guess technically it could be to remove teams, but that's not the direction the Frontier League wants to go. And they seem quite proud of their 16 team number. And if anything, they want to expand it. So, I don't know how many teams are looking to expand to. I know that multiple markets have been kicked around and discussed at points, and how far they've gotten in conversations. That's where I'm having troubles exactly pinning down, was this an idea that was batted around? Was it a suggestion? Was this something that you were currently, talking about as a league? But the ones that have come up is Montreal, which would be at I think an existing ballpark that might need a renovation. I have limited info there. That's the one I know the least about. Beyond that,
just to jump in on the Montreal thing, I do remember in the All-Star game announcement, not obviously nothing formal from the league yet, but I saw in the one from around the All-Star game where he said Quebec's getting the one for 24. It was mentioned that they want a team in Montreal. So that could be at Quebec's insistence that, hey, we want another team in province to kind of help out our travel too.
Yeah. Beyond that, there's also Pawtucket hanging around. Pawtucket's a complicated one, like you said, because so when I got the information about Pawtucket, I have a little clearer time frame on this piece where the conversation with the different sources who sort of brought Pawtucket to me, that was discussed before, and there was basically news that that stadium in Pawtucket's done. But since then, so I got it basically when it's out of date. But since then, there's still continued rumblings about that weird Russian billionaire who's sniffing around out there. Or sorry, Slovenian, I think he is. But let's be honest, I think
Eastern European,
Russian.
Yeah,
that guy. The big issue is that guy is a weirdo. He's a really weird guy, and I would not endorse him becoming an owner. It's the kid of this really rich New Yorker. He's a multi-billionaire. His kid is the one involved with it, and his kid is so weird, bro. He's got 20 kids or something ridiculous like that. It's Stefan Soloviev. Buddy, what? He's an American, but that,
it's not a great look.
It's definitely a concern. It doesn't seem like a consistent, even keel type of person. Even when they talk to him about why he wants to keep it, it's just oh, I just saw it and I love it and I want to keep it. And it's what? I don't think that's a basis for a long-term successful organization, especially someone who has no idea what they're doing running a baseball organization, which he obviously would not. That's where that is. So I don't know. There was just another article about that with him who I heard he was out, and then now I'm hearing that he's maybe still interested, but I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that. What I would say is that the fact that there's still articles around, people are saying oh, that thing's done, they're tearing it down. I'm you don't know. Yeah. It is easier to throw a ballpark up or renovate the carcass of an existing ballpark than it is to build a new one. So don't ever write off that until, there's something else built there.
Until it's torn down, it's not done.
Yes, exactly. The ones that were the most interesting to me were, and I'll just give what I have on each one, would be the two Atlantic League markets that have been discussed. And again, I don't know the extent. It's just working off of the rumor and reading the room on what conversations keep coming back around and what names I keep hearing over and over. Charleston is one of them. Staten Island is the other. And I think they're two very different situations. Staten Island, I would be surprised if they can leave the Atlantic League this soon. I would assume they at least have another year they would have to do.
Okay, that's a contract thing, or?
I think, I don't know the exact things. I just think 2 years is a very short time to agree to, and I'd be surprised. When it comes to Staten Island, I don't think they're seeing the return they want to see from the Atlantic League. I don't think it's a market they want to be involved in. Just looking at them as a team and an organization, they feel like an organization that would be more cut out for and comfortable in, both financially and just operations wise, competing against teams like the Jackals and the Miners rather than the Ducks. Like, let's be honest here. Like, it's such a different challenge, and it's a lot, and there's, it's expensive, and they're still not seeing a big attendance push. So I wouldn't be surprised by that. I was not surprised to hear that name come up. But I think there would be complications and possibly a wait until that happened. I think, and if we want to get into my theory of what might happen here and how this plays out, I worked in the Andy Shea run organization in Lexington. He runs the Charleston organization right now. He expressed early and often to me that he is not happy with the Atlantic League and that he does not want to be in the Atlantic League. He felt it was too expensive. He felt that his voice did not carry enough weight within conversations in the league. Compared to other owners, he did not agree with the way that Rick White handled things very frequently. He also seemed to resent the fact that, the league would be like, hey, we need you to do this and do this well, like whatever it might be. And there would be moments where he's like, just let me do my thing, which we saw how that went in Lexington.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons. He even discussed wanting to do basically the way they did the Bourbon Trail during COVID. They had 4 sites that they had, he basically had multiple teams that were moving around different sites.
Yeah.
That's what he was even thinking about. So that's where his head is at. So hearing that he could potentially go to the Frontier does not surprise me at all. I think it would solve a couple things for the Frontier League. It would mean that they could get rid of the Grays without stepping backwards in the number of teams that they have in the league. So they do that 16 number. Yeah. I think it also is, it fills in a little bit of gap in the map. If you look at it, it's not when you look at the bad travel, you look at the Capitals to the Grizzlies. That's a tough scene.
Yeah.
But it does add another middle ground, a stopping point that's between, essentially the two, central most teams right now are the Crushers and the Wild Things. They would be south of both, but kind of between them, talking east.
You'd be in the same region.
Exactly right, which can simplify some travel. They could look at maybe doing 4 teams per division. That way they can start to split some things up.
It would do a lot for them.
Yes, it would do a lot for them locations-wise. I think Montreal would offer something similar to that. So that's why, and honestly, so would all the Staten Island and Pawtucket would also offer that, that kind of situation. So what they really need now is just not to have that damn travel team.
Yeah.
But I think my feel would be that next year the Atlantic League sees Hagerstown come in, which gives them, if you're keeping track at home, 11. I think they would keep Frederick, which would bring them to 12. I think Gastonia, my prediction is Gastonia is not back in the Atlantic League next year, which would put them once again at 11, and it will make it nice and clean and convenient to let Charleston go. And then they're back at an even number 10, which is kind of funny after all that expansion that they didn't have a 10 again. That would then give the Frontier 16 with a little bit of a better footprint, and, hopefully less travel, I guess, for those teams who are more concerned about that. So that is my prediction on what happens next year. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Sorry that took several turns, but if I'm putting out rumor and conjecture, and there's different levels of,
you want to fill it out.
I at least want to justify that. Yeah. Cause one, I don't want to start anything by putting something out there that's look, this is just being talked about a little bit, and it might not even be talked about officially by anybody. The other, and I don't want, if one of those is completely off and it's just rumor, I don't want it to taint things like Charleston, which I have a lot more information on and things like that. So appreciate you riding with me on that adventure there. But yeah, that's what you got going on for potential Frontier League expansion in the near future.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to add except for a couple points. One, if you were to take the attendance, and we'll just assume reported attendance is legit, which always is a sketchy thing. Although with Charleston, Chuck Domino, that normally is a decent number. Their 2,300 a game would put them 1, 2, 3, 4. It would put them in 5th in attendance in the Frontier League behind Tri-City, New York, Quebec, and Schaumburg. If you do the same for Staten Island, who is currently at about 1,100 a game, it would put them second from the bottom, ahead of only New Jersey. Now, you could argue that, well, when they're playing more local teams and they're in a more, for lack of a better term at the moment, competitive situation, maybe the number goes up a bit more, maybe you're able to do something a little bit more. But even still, to reach the Sussex number, 1,500 a game seems maybe a little optimistic. Also,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, the only other point I had was I looked at Montreal ballparks very quickly. The only one that really springs to mind, and again, maybe there's more to it that didn't pop up in my initial Google search, but Gary Carter Stadium appears to be one. They played a exhibition game there actually earlier this year in June between Three Rivers and Schaumburg. Problem is it only seats 1,000 people. So that's obviously an extremely low number, and judging by it, their seating is more like in line with what Northern Colorado has. It's very reminiscent of that. So it's not really, something with a professional ballpark in mind, and they just put about $10 million into it, mainly in turf upgrades. So they went to turf. I don't think they'd really be willing to put more money into the thing. Perhaps they would, but I imagine to get it to an actual, Frontier League standard of living, it would require a more extensive kind of upgrade there, and may just be easier to go something brand new. Perhaps there's another ballpark there that will require less work, or there's a patch of land that you could do something with. But either way, Montreal does seem to have its own challenges.
Yeah, and I mean, if they could find a way to, a small, small capacity or listed capacity doesn't mean, everything. If there's a way you could set it up, or maybe even just do a renovation which allows for more like standing areas, you could be fine. I don't know the logistics on that. That is the one I definitely have the least information on. But I think might have more info as soon as next week on that. That's actually where I've gotten a little more movement, which is nice. But of course, it's the one I currently don't have as much info on. So it's a weird mix there. But yeah, I've done a search through there too. That's kind of where I was finding as well. If there was going to be something existing, it might need to go that way. Though the thing with the Frontier is they are a little more flexible when it comes to the ballparks they're in. It's not like the Atlantic League where they have like kind of a hard set of rules to where they will or will not go.
Yeah, the thing that gets me though, and this will be the last thing, then we'll move on to actual baseball discussion here. The last point I really have is, if Montreal has the backing of Quebec, I feel like that's a very powerful voice to say, make it happen.
Yeah, and I think it should not be understated how valuable to the Frontier League the Canadian organizations are. I don't know as much with when it comes to Trois-Rivières. Like, I don't know how the league feels on them, but just by seeing the fan base and the energy and the seriousness around the organization, specifically in Ottawa and Quebec, those are organizations you can build around, ones that are serious about staying in this league and,
Quebec's
and
a model
representing
franchise.
the league. Yes. So those are ones where, just like with Tri-City, where it sounds like Tri-City might have been like, yeah, we're going to hang around, but you need to do something about the travel in the Empire State Grays. And all of a sudden, that's when certain names, I'm sure they've been looking, but that's when movement really seemed to start. So I agree completely. I think those teams would love to have another Canadian team. Those teams, there is no rule saying that they need to have Canadian guys. Of course, you're going to sign locals. Like, that's a normal thing. Like, you tend to see guys that are more local to teams probably on these Indy Ball rosters, but like, it is an outlier how many Canadian guys are playing on those teams. Like, it is one, again, talk about what's good for the game. It is great for Canadian baseball to be up there. It's great for Indy Ball. It's great for the Frontier League to diversify that way. Like, there is no bad thing about having a strong Canadian market presence. And hell, Montreal would also offer a very unique opportunity with the history of, MLB and the Expos, and like give an opportunity to come in and do something there. I don't know. I think it's all good stuff. And I do think while I have very little detail on Montreal, I would absolutely not be surprised if that's a priority moving forward.
It's just the one point I wanted to bring up was who's pushing each market, because it feels like everybody has, one they're pushing, or in the case of like a Charleston, it feels like, okay, this just makes a lot of sense and it solves a lot of problems for a lot of people. So maybe we make it happen.
Yeah. And I know Florence is a backer on that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like one, it's a close travel partner, and two, Florence ownership and Charleston ownership are very close. So that's one where, that they are definitely combining efforts on that one. I don't know what they're like with the Wild Things. I don't know what the Wild Things ownership is like at all. So with the front office, I have zero insight into. Yeah. There's only a few out there anymore where I at least, don't have any feel for even how they typically operate. The Wild Things, all I know is Pat McAfee played there. That's what I've got. That is all I got.
They're another one that's well ran, but yeah, they are a little bit harder to crack.
Hey, look, if I don't know anything too, that usually means there's no drama. So that's good. Yeah, that's nice. I haven't had to find an inside source on something. Yeah.
Yeah. That also, to be fair, their press guy does a good job. Kyle Dawson. He's good at his job.
Yes. That is very true. And maybe that's part of it too. Maybe I haven't had to do my own digging on things and reporting on things. That's just, they are what they are at face value. And that's kind of how I live when it comes to the Wild Things.
Fair enough. So, on that note, we'll move it over into actual baseball discussion now. We'll try to give you something good on that front there, because this is a pretty jam-packed episode. Everyone wanted last week's one with the Boulder fight, but this is the one that's really the interesting one.
At least the weird people like us. So take that how you will. I
mean, let's be real. If you're not people like us, why are you listening? Like, I have so many questions to ask. If you're not into this, why are you listening? I want to examine
Dewey Cox walking into the room and they're doing drugs. It's like, get out of here, Dewey. You don't want this shit. Sorry about your podcast. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. Let's take this back a couple steps. Let's start it on Friday. The first, when we last left off, we were recording. We said there was a lot of open-ended possibilities to postseason here. American Association pretty much shook out exactly like we thought it was. King County clinched, and then a day or so later, Lake Country went out, bowed out, Cleburne took it, and Fargo wrapped up their deal too. So I don't really think there's much to go over there, so we'll leave that pin in that grenade, and we'll focus more on the Frontier League, because we haven't done enough of that this week. And
right, good Lord.
Yeah, really. But they're the interesting league, though, because they had a lot of open-endedness on their postseason structure. And Friday kicked off for us when we got done recording by about 30 minutes later, getting word that Quebec was going to have to forfeit a game. The game prior. Yeah, right after we get done talking about how, the New York, New Jersey series, that's going to be, very important. He's going to come down. Does PJ want to get his guys in line, get them rested, and just say, hey, let's knock out this wild card game and then, get ready for Quebec, or are they going to make the shot for it? And then when we saw how everything broke down, we're like, yeah, he's probably just going to get them ready. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, they're right back in the fight, because now Quebec lost ground. The reasoning why they had to forfeit the game is because they played a player out of position, meaning Greg Bird played a position he wasn't allowed to, because the terms of when he got signed was he's allowed to replace an injured player. And when you replace the injured player, then you can only play the positions they played. So in this particular case, he was allowed to be an outfielder and a DH and nothing else, and he played first. So that resulted in a forfeit. Does it really matter? We'll find out when we, get into Saturday and Sunday in the discussion, but that's how Friday kicked off for us. How the rest of Friday went, it got kind of interesting. New York split the doubleheader with New Jersey. Sussex beat Empire State. Tri-City lost to Three Rivers. Quebec beat Ottawa. So realistically, what happened was Sussex got put right into serious conversation about they may get this final spot in the wild card. New York was still in a position where it's like, okay, we're going to need to do something here, but we're still very much in the thick of things. This could go either way still, even though odds were definitely favoring Sussex County here. And Tri-City was still in the middle of spiraling out of control. And Quebec was just kind of like, okay, business as usual. We got to go win a game now. Okay. Right. So that was all that. So any thoughts?
I'm going to struggle to focus on Friday for a moment. This is terrible. I don't really have a lot of input on the Quebec Jersey situation looking back. However, and we can talk about this later if we want. I've had some strong feelings about this though. And the reason it goes
way back to like 2021, you might remember, like as they entered the playoffs, like Boog Powell went to the Ducks. And it was like, what the hell? It was well past the trade deadline.
Yeah.
The situation there was that you could still make a trade, or you still could add a player to your roster if they replaced an injured player. I don't know the finer points of the rule in the Atlantic League currently, but that's interesting here that the Frontier League limits like what positions you literally can play.
Yeah.
I think there's a better solution there. I think it's so silly to have to operate on this like trust thing of, you know, this player is hurt. He's legitimately hurt. It's not like he's just going somewhere else. It's not that we're saying he's hurt and he's not, so that we can improve our roster before playoffs. It's not that, you know, now you're like making a weird deal with a team to get their player late, like right before playoffs. You know, it doesn't cost the team you're taking. Like it didn't cost Gastonia anything to send Boog over because their season was done.
Yeah.
It was just very weird. The vibe was terrible on that. And so I've had a sort of radar on that ever since. I'll say I think the best solution, most of these leagues you can carry a reserve roster, and usually it brings you like 28 guys. And I think it maybe at the end of the year you're allowed to like roster expand to like maybe 2 more extra guys. And basically what those extra guys can do, and because you don't want guys just sitting around, that's not right, that's not what we're supposed to be doing here, is like active roster. Like you can expand your active roster. And those guys can be then like that is your pool for replacing injured players now. And like if your star player gets injured and that's all you've got, like that's tough. That is what it is. Like I think that's just sort of that would be the solution there instead of this weird dance of, you know, everybody in the Atlantic was real mad about the Boog Powell deal. It seems that Quebec, who is, as you just said, is a model organization, was seemingly pretty confused by the move made or the rules surrounding that. Like, I think it's just a much cleaner solution and it can avoid issues like this. Again, talk about the optics. It doesn't look good having a team forfeit a game for a roster rule. This isn't Little League.
Yeah, especially a team that's playing for positioning. Yeah.
30 days from the last like regular season game scheduled, you can expand your roster to an extra 2 players. Any player on that active roster is now like considered available, can be put in the games. And that way you can also, you know, survive an injury that might come up late after a trade deadline. That's my opinion.
Yeah. So just to kind of contextualize it. So your reserve roster would be, for lack of a better term, like a practice squad. And then once you get within that final month of the year, it'd be almost like a September call-up situation where your roster expands to add more players. So that way you can go and not have a situation like this where you have a restricted addition essentially.
Yeah, and reserve roster is used in like different, like it's got different labels, things like that. Like it's often the inactive roster. It's usually, that's where you see, especially like, I know the Atlantic League shuffles like crazy, like shuffles the inactive roster for pitchers, getting fresh arms in there. So that's, you know, I think, and I don't really, it's because not really a travel squad even. Like I would want it, I guess, throughout the year. Okay, let me clean this up a little bit. So typically the inactive roster is like you have to make a roster move to bring somebody from your inactive roster to your active roster. I would just say basically your inactive roster can open up 2 spots maybe, and then you can keep basically an expanded active roster, including that whole pool. And I don't see a real advantage. I don't see why anybody would complain about that off the top of my head. From my perspective, I'm like, we're talking about like back end bench guys who are currently free agents in Indy Ball for the most part. You know, if somebody is getting into a game that somebody wants to point to and say they shouldn't be getting into that game, for the most part, it's, you know, it's a back end bench guy. It's not Boog Powell getting shipped from one team to another that like 2 days before the playoffs.
It's not a tangible upgrade in the position.
No, and it also can talk about, you know, what are we doing here? Like, I think it also could get some guys some at bats that might not get at bats. Like, if you look at it too, there's weird situations. Like, we had a couple guys last year looking at, you know, the team coming out of camp in Lexington. Like, we knew that wasn't the roster we wanted at the end of the year. But
essentially, once we were going to bring guys on, we were going to make the decision of were we going to just outright release some guys or move them to other leagues, or, were we going to keep them on the inactive roster and then we can cycle them in for at-bats. But the problem with doing that is someone's got to go inactive for that. And not a lot of guys want to sit back and give away ABs at the Indy Ball level because they want to get the hell out of Indy Ball. So by doing that also, you can get some guys at bats without having to make a guy inactive for a full game to do so.
All right.
That's a generalization because everyone has their own weird stipulations with how you can move roster spots and whatever, but that's just based on the general flow of how rosters work in leagues.
Which is all
so that was really in the weeds, but that was the number one thing that stuck out to me was these stupid roster rules.
So that was a long way of saying roster rule had some sort of impact, or at least we thought it would, and in the end, I guess it kind of did.
Yeah, and that I called BS on saying Quebec volunteered this themselves, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
No. I think what happened was they got
during the game. I think they flagged that during the game and then brought it to the league after the fact.
I just think they didn't
Quebec was oh yeah. Yeah, I think they did the thing like the NCAA does where you're oh, you get caught and you can go, yes, we did do that. Sorry about that. We will inflict this penalty on ourselves.
So essentially what you're saying is they did not pull a Zach Bryan.
What I'm saying is you can't take away Reggie Bush's titles. They happened.
All right. Well, just let me know if there's let me just know if there's a Labrador hanging out the passenger door.
I did see a tweet about that. That dog is happy and sleeping.
Okay, that's good news. I'm glad the dog is all right. I'm going to circle us back on topic. We're going to talk about Saturday now. So on Saturday, Tri-City finally breaks their losing streak. Granted, it's extras against the third worst team in the league, I believe. So not a great look there, boys. But you got it done nonetheless. Sussex County also got a win, which put them into a win and you're in situation. And that's because New Jersey defeated New York. That is not good because New York really needed to win that game. And now they were going to need help to get it done. Quebec also beat Ottawa. So at this point, you would know better than I would because I don't do the odds and whatnot. And also it's been almost a week, so I don't have it recalled to memory now. But I believe that pretty much clinched the East for Quebec, if not literally clinching it for them.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add on that one. It was just, I don't want to make it, I don't know.
Yeah.
Part of me is that was kind of anticlimactic the way it ended, but that's just because Quebec ended up winning anyway. But I do think Tri-City, man.
Yeah.
Good Lord. I mean, that's a joke. That is, sorry.
We still have Sunday.
That is that's 2007 Mets.
You could have used the Red Sox from a year or two later as an example. You could have done that. That was an option. It was on the table and you opted not to do that.
No. I'm good.
In any case, we'll go to Sunday here because, technically, everybody was still alive for that final wildcard spot. But the way everything shook out, not exactly the case. So, New Jersey won their game against Rockland. That eliminated Rockland outright, but Rockland was going to need teams to lose to help them out. So, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Tri-City also did win. First, win you could kind of feel good about. But they were going to need both New York and Sussex County to lose to get themselves in. And, well, that didn't quite happen because Sussex County handled Empire State and got their win and they're in. So they wound up taking it. They really came out of nowhere, just ran right up the rail, took the spot. I believe it was, a 7-game win streak they rode into the postseason?
Yeah, I think so.
So they worked hard to get it. Yeah. So I guess this is the point where we talk about Tri-City and their choke job now.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with it.
Same old Valley Cats. That's
really it is, and I don't want to be that guy because it feels like they've done it more
lazy,
often than they have.
Yeah.
Because in my head they've done it more often than they actually have. But at the same time, coming close and not getting there is now that is what has repeated itself. I say 3 times, right? Is that inaccurate?
Every year.
Yeah. Every year, yeah. it does feel like a waste to talk about because, like, what are you to do about it? Like,
because here's the thing that's
it's
different.
one thing, and this is an MLB team that like keeps getting to the end and then they choke. And it's like, we got to make a change of manager because we need somebody to get it done. Like,
But you're not
I think
getting
a lot
a
of
better
times
one.
when Pete's getting more out of this team than he should have, just because what he has shown time and time again is he can network and bring guys in like with the best of them. There's no move to make. It's just, I really think it's just maybe it's clubhouse adjustments down the stretch next year. But like that's what I can think. Like it's tough to. It's tough to say like, oh, they're choking when there really is no, if that's the narrative, there really is no part two to that narrative, which is weird.
Yeah, and see, the thing is, like, this year was a choke job. In the past, it hasn't been that. It was slow starts that killed them. So it's not like they're losing the same exact way. And I'm trying to find my tweet about it because I think I said it pretty well in the moment there. It's just I'm having a very hard time digging through, a week's worth of tweets to find the thing. In any event, you said it right when you said, you can't change out the manager because Pete's the best you're going to have, even though last year his deal, so he's going to need a re-up if you want to continue that. So maybe you make a change. Like, I don't think you're going to do any better though. So it doesn't really make any sense to, but if he doesn't want to come back, then then he's not coming back. But I don't know what else he'd be doing with himself unless he's, just kind of over independent ball, but managing in this for probably being in Indy Ball really for like over 2 decades now. I mean, I don't think he calls it quits now.
He seems dedicated to it. I mean,
yeah.
Whether that's because affiliated ball is an option, so you got to be dedicated to it, or because he is genuinely passionate. I do tend to think like I have some critical thoughts of Pete, but like I do think this is genuinely his passion, what he likes to do. Yeah,
he genuinely cares. That's the thing.
Yes.
So that's what makes it tough. So, like, you assume, like, just say, for the sake of argument, he's coming back. Like, you've changed over this roster enough where you can't really blame the players. So, like, you look at Pete, but Pete's won in the past, and he's still putting together competitive teams, and it's just a matter of this is a small playoff field. There's 3 teams to make it. So, like, what exactly is it that we go to? What's the next thing? Where do you go here? I found the tweet finally here, and what I had said was the losses to Empire State look really bad now. It's still a good year from Tri-City, but after 3 years, 2 of which end on the last day via a Sussex County game versus a 1-year team, close but no cigar rings hollow. So, like, that's what makes this an interesting off-season up there, is that it's not as simple as, remove a manager, put him in there. It's not as simple as change the staff out because we've done that. You could try overhauling the roster, but he's done that twice middle of the season and essentially was 100% turnover here. You brought in, on paper, the best skilled player in the league in Aaron Altier. And yeah, he was hurt for a little bit, but still, didn't do enough. So,
yeah,
like, where do you go? Because I don't want to question his ability to build a team with roster restrictions. In Grand Prairie, he did fine with that.
Yeah.
It's just, on the Frontier League level, you don't have the same kind of money, so maybe it's harder to build a team like that. But again, he funds college guys too that are good. So that's what makes it tough, is there's no real answer here. And you can't just say, all right, just regroup and go right back at it again. Because, the system doesn't work, so you got to try something new, but there's nothing new to try.
And that's where I come to the unsatisfying conclusion here. And that's why I was I struggled to even get in the conversation, because it's easy to be like, well, this is what happened, and every year it's the same thing. I mean, they slumped in a way that was that would kill most teams. However, it still would not have killed them if the Miners didn't rip off 7 wins in a row down the stretch. Like, sometimes it's just
baseball.
Like, baseball sucks, dude. It's a pain. And it just kind of, the unsatisfying conclusion is that's just kind of maybe how it is. And there isn't even a finger to point. Like, obviously, look, you should have done better down the stretch, but What are you going to change next year? I don't know. I don't know if there is anything to change next year.
Yeah, like
I'll say
3-7, you still finish, just to cut you off, you still finish technically tied for that last spot. It's just you lost the one series of the year you couldn't lose. If you flip even, like, let's just say you lose an additional game to, I don't know, Empire State, but you get one more win over the Miners, I think that's enough to do it. It's just you won the wrong games.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it. Like, it is, you need to win the games that you have. Like,
you can't go one
a lot
game
of it,
above
especially when you have
500
a team like Empire
conference.
State, and I would say this applies to the South, to the Atlantic League as well. When you have a team like Lexington, it was so bad for the start of the second half. Like, there's games you got to win, but there's games you got to not lose.
Yeah.
And like, I'm looking, I just sketched it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 wins, it looks like, for Empire State.
Yeah.
They won 3 times against 2 teams, Trois-Rivières and Tri-City. Empire State only won twice against Sussex, won once against New Jersey, and 0 times against Quebec. That means literally just by winning 1 or 2 more games against Empire State than the playoffs. And honestly, it's in our head that they lost more to Empire State the year before. They did lose once, but the teams that beat them into the playoffs either lost once as well or didn't lose to them at all. So again, an Empire State, like, literally 1 extra win against Empire State is all you need, which, yeah, it could be against anybody, but the lowest common denominator there.
Yeah.
So, I would also say, let's not overlook, like, this is a team that now 3 years in a row has had to make a push. If you recall, last year they had this slide in like June. They had a really bad stretch that put them, they started out hot. They kind of stumbled in late May, stumbled into June, and then had to, like, pull themselves through July and then get together late. They had to make a late push again in 2021, as I recall. So this is definitely the thing. And they did not have a good start this year as well. I wouldn't say it was as, accentuated as others, but it looks like, I mean, I think they were below 500 in mid-June. And if you look at, they're collapsing down the stretch. Yeah, if you're a team where you have to go like gangbusters for a month and a half or 2 months to close the year because you had a bad start and someone out of the gate, like, you can't, things are going to fall apart. Like, it's not like, that's where I start to differ from my idea of like, well, it's just baseball. Sometimes you go cold and someone else gets hot. And I'm like, well, yeah, but did you get cold because you had to beat this team to death and work this pitching staff to death to get to where you are because of a bad start? And that is where I do start to see maybe a trend. And that points to, I've complimented Pete's ability to recruit mid-season, and it's very impressive. But I think he's had a couple different times now where he's had to kind of redesign a roster in these 3 years.
Oh, yeah, the first 2 years.
After the start of the season.
Yeah, the first 2 years. I mean, horrible months. And then he had to rebuild them on the fly come like mid-June. And I remember watching those turnovers. They were like 12 guys,
he had
15
like 10
guys.
roster moves in one day,
Yeah,
right?
it just,
So
12 guys got cut and 12 new guys came in. It was like, okay, we're just cleaning house.
Yeah, and that's where you start to point at things. Like, okay, let's say maybe that is it. Maybe we just found it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. You need to show up on opening day ready to rock.
Yeah. And I mean, like,
and that's easier said than done. Hell, when I was baseball ops for Lexington, I did not. We had a bad team to start the year. And the plan was to make it better, but that was a huge gamble. Gastonia started out hot, and we were like, oh, I guess we're not catching. I guess we are, like, literally a week in the year, we're like, oh, I guess we're not going to be winning the first half. Good to know.
Yeah.
Like, that's how quick it gets out of hand. So, like, you need to be on it when the gun goes off, man. You got to be ready to run.
Yeah. And I mean, just to wrap up the Tri-City point, because then we can get into actual playoff discussion. I looked at their start this year too, and honestly, I remembered it being better than it really was. Like, their first month, they have lost to Lake Erie, it lost to Gateway, lose a series to Evansville, dropped a game to Empire State, dropped another game to Three Rivers. I think they wind up dropping 2 there. Drop a game in extras to Washington, lose a series at Windy City, dropped another game against Washington, swept by Sussex County, which, again, in hindsight, kind of funny that 2 sweeps at the hands of the Miners is kind of what did them in. And they also dropped another game, their opening series, against Three Rivers. So if you're losing games to Three Rivers, Washington, Windy City, again Washington, again Three Rivers, again Empire State, those are losses that come back to bite you. Like, you you can't drop that. They got handled by Quebec too. Realistically, I remember them having a stronger start than they did. So yeah, I think we're really on to something that may be, pretty obvious in hindsight, which is, again, the starts are what's killing them. And really what bails them out is you have like these runs, like from July 23rd through August 2nd, they didn't lose a single game. They won all that. So that's what, 10-game winning streak. So you go on runs like that. It's like, okay, well, that's going to make up for a lot of mistakes. But then you go ahead and you wind up dropping, 6 in a row, 7 in a row at a critical stretch. It's like, well, we just undid all that progress. And in the end, in the aggregate, it's like, well, they still finished 15 games above 500. But the problem is another team did, and they had your number. So, yeah, it's just kind of funny that of the 4 teams that could be considered playoff teams, you had 2 that were 55 and 40, decision made on a tiebreaker, and then 60 and 35 with a decision made on a tiebreaker. It's kind of funny it worked out in the East. And and what's even better is you look in the West and it's like, if you put Tri-City and the Boulders both there, they're both probably in the postseason. Evansville's certainly not there, and Schaumburg's borderline. So I think they get in because they have one fewer loss because they played one fewer game, which that's got to chap you if you're New York, but
right.
So that's happened before, certainly, but even still. So it's just, if you're Tri-City, it's a year where it's very underwhelming. We didn't even really discuss New York and all this because I just feel like they were never, like they were always around, but they were never that team that I think we wanted to do better, that we expected to do better. Perhaps I'm misremembering.
I felt like, I honestly felt like every time I looked at them, I went, oh, like they're looking like prime for a playoff spot here. It was like they just got off of like 6 of their last 9 or something, or like against Empire State, or like they just went through a stretch of just like Trois-Rivières and Empire State, and you're like, oh. And then they would play Quebec and be like, and they're back. Like, it was just like, that was who they were. They were middle of the road this year. And it's just, I don't think they were a big threat. I'm glad, this sounds bad, but this sounds biased. It's not. I'm glad they didn't make playoffs because I don't know that they would have.
They weren't a playoff caliber
show. And not that Sussex let the world on fire, which we, talk about coming full circle. We talked about that way long ago, but
we're about to get back to it. But
I don't think that would have gone well for the Boulders. That's for sure.
Yeah. And honestly though, the Boulders the last 2 years have taken a step forward. Like full regular TJ Stanton years have certainly produced good results for them. There's no doubt about that. They went from a team that, like I said before, they're pretty much a 450 winning percentage team. They're going to finish a few games under 500. They're going to have one good run, but there's going to be a lot of just men's of baseball where they're not really a factor. And it's unfortunate because where they are located, the ballpark they have and the facility they have and the way they run their organization, they should be a competitive team. They should every year be competing for postseason play. And I think they're back in that spot now, where they're going to contend every year. I mean, hell, they came down to the last day this year. They made the wild card the year before. So they're right back in that kind of competitive frame. Now, obviously 21's a bit different. COVID year and the division setup was weird and different. 20, nothing was played. And then 19 was still Can-Am. So that doesn't really, that's not real. It's 4 teams in a 6-team league make a postseason. That's not real. So, but still, the point is they're on the upswing. It's a good thing to see. I'd like to see more out of them. I'd like them to be more consistent, but I think they're on the right track. So they're an interesting team to watch.
If you pick the Boulders to be a playoff team preseason, I would have looked at you funny. If you do it next year, I probably will not.
Yeah. Like, that's the thing. Like, the weird thing, and the last point I'll say before we go to actual postseason, because we do have matches to talk about and projections and stuff to get to. But I'll wrap it on this point, at least for this section, which is you look at both teams based out of New York, and you have just complete opposite feelings going into the offseason. Like, if you're New York, you're like, yeah, you know what? We did pretty much what we did last year. It's a little bit of a plateau, but it was a much more difficult division this year. We took a lot of good steps forward. We lost some very talented pieces, and we're going to lose, a couple of guys that we really don't want to have to lose. But overall, we're in a fairly good spot heading into 24. And if you're Three Rivers, you're like, or not three. If you're Tri-City, you're like, you know what? We keep trying stuff and it's not working and it's the same problem and we don't know how to fix it. And there's no real good solution. It's just such a totally different, kind of feel and mentality going into it that, it's interesting to see.
Yeah. And again, when it comes down to like how to even handle that, it's just, I do think a lot of it's going to have to be season prep and just getting like from day one attacking the season and avoiding this sort of slow start and or the trip up mid-year. Like even, maybe it is, thinking hard about, how, and I don't have this answer. If I did, I'd be probably in the league right now, but, having the, sort of mindset of, how are the good teams turning it around when they start to, if they drop 3 in a row, how do they keep from dropping 6 in a row, things like that, because that's when really you start to see teams get eaten up and all of a sudden 1 week they're in the playoff picture and the next week they're like literally out, like fully out of it. And you're like, oh my God, that was quick.
Exactly. And honestly, it's a great way to connect us to the playoff point, and we'll segue on that, which is trying to get into the postseason and preventing that 1 or 2 loss to spiral into a 4, 5, 6 game losing streak is a lot like a lot of these teams we saw in the postseason where 1 or 2 run innings spiraled for a lot of these teams and became 3 run innings, 4 run innings, 5 run innings, or you'd give up 2, you'd stop bleeding there, then a scoreless inning, then another 2 runs the inning after. And it goes back to being a good team means stopping your losses, cutting them, saying, all right, the bleeding's going to be here, but we're going to get out of it. Saying we're going to concede 1 run, but we're going to get it back. We're not going to give up 2. We're not going to try to do anything extra. And just when things go wrong, they don't go really wrong. And I think you can kind of see that in the New Jersey Sussex game. We touched on that. We touched on the Evansville series that just got started now. So we'll try to go through New Jersey here real quick. New Jersey Sussex, that is. And then obviously Evansville Schaumburg, we know who comes out in that one. So we'll try to get through those 2 rather quickly. But in the case of New Jersey and Sussex here, New Jersey felt in control. We mentioned Tavares earlier, a lights out performance, really quality there. And it kind of leaves you wondering like, okay, was it a matter of Tavares was that good that the Sussex hitters just couldn't? And I mean, obviously the last 10 days of the season, they really put everything they had into making the postseason, and they clearly needed every ounce to get to where they got. But, was it just they were out of steam and that's all there was to it? Was it Tavares was that good, or was it just there's a legitimate quality of player difference there? Also, I think it's safe to say a poor start out of Tyler Thornton did not help the cause. And in the end, I'm not sure about you, but when we were sitting there watching this game, I kind of felt by the 4th or 5th inning that the outcome was already set in stone.
Yeah, I compared it when I was sitting there with you to like, not to bring him up again, but it had the same energy as sitting there watching that 2021 Legend team that PJ had. Yeah. In the way, like it felt like they could score whenever they wanted. Now we're watching a Quebec game where they seem to maybe not have that going on, but
yeah.
But that was the feel that night where like they needed some runs right out of the gate, got them, and then they felt a little bit of pressure the 1 inning, and then they came right back out and they scored a couple more. And you're like, oh, all right, well now it's 5-run game and Tavares on the mound, so how many runs do they need? And apparently they did not need 5; they could have used much less. So we talked about before how I don't necessarily blame Sussex. I did at first, like, how do you come up so flat for this game? But like, I think Tavares is just a really difficult matchup. Like if you can go with a strategy and he'll, mess up your strategy and then you're in trouble. So, that's one thing. I do think, there's a possibility they did come out a little flat. When you see a team come through like that long sort of chase, like, from a week out, they were like, all right, just got to win games, just win ball games, boys. And then like they did. And then it became, all right, here's what we need to do to make it in. And the last day they make it in. There can be that moment where you felt like you made it, like you
mission accomplished.
Like for over a month now, the Jackals have been looking at a championship as the finish line, not the playoffs. As for Sussex, we talked about it, this playoffs weren't even a thing 2.5 weeks ago. Like they were not involved, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, like if we go all out, we can make the playoffs. Like that became the goal, and I could see maybe a letdown there. I don't know if there was. I don't know that clubhouse that way, but. Potential. I don't know.
Yeah,
it definitely. I think. Yeah,
it definitely could go that way, or it goes the way of you just stay in that mode and you keep hunting. But the fact they had to make up as much ground as they did, and in the way they did, I definitely could see it being the finish line is the playoffs, right? And then it's kind of the dog that catches the car, and it's like, oh, we're here. So I definitely agree with you on that mentality there. I will say, on the point of not blaming the minors as much as crediting Tavares, why, yeah, Tavares did a fantastic job. I mean, complete game, shutout, 109 pitches to get 10 strikeouts, and really just kind of mow through them. Very efficient. We went through that earlier. I am going to point out, though, you can't have your leadoff hitter strike out 3 times, and you can't have your by far best player in a new strike out twice, go hitless, and not get on base once. That cannot happen. You know, your 3-4 hitter cannot go, really, actually, you go through the whole top part of the lineup, your first 4 batters through, combined for 1 guy on base for the whole game. That cannot happen. Like, I get it. He's dealing. I get it. He's doing really well. But just think back to watching that game. How many times was there a ball hit where you said, that could be trouble, and then a jackal fielder made a very good defensive play, or just an above average defensive play to prevent the hit or prevent the runner from getting on base?
It happened. I mean, yeah, a lot. I would say maybe like even 9 times, like almost as many times as there were just strikeouts.
I don't think so. I don't remember it being
really.
I remember it being
now
2 or
maybe,
3.
Maybe I'm thinking of, especially because at the end of that game, so like when Tavares just was like, all right, no more strikeouts, like he just started putting the ball in play. I think the later innings saw more of it, especially that 9th inning where I think it was 3 hard hit balls and all of them got snagged like in the air. So that might be coloring my perspective of it. Those last 4 innings where I think he had maybe 1 K and like everything else was like contacts and pitching to contact. So perhaps that's it. But what jumped out at me was like the seeming lack of an adjustment from a team who has seen Tavares before. Yeah, I don't know. Like you come in and you get like basically knocked down for 6 straight Ks. I felt like the approach did not change all that much, other than maybe they're swinging a little earlier on the count.
See, I'm thinking back there, and I really don't remember. Like, there's a couple that got hit hard, yeah, but in the 9th, it was just like it was over quick. That's just
I don't know how many pitches that was, but it might have been like 4.
Yeah, because I remember like looking over and then looking up and going, "Oh, it's done."
I was like, that's it.
Yeah, because even the last half, if I remember right, it was 1 or 2 pitches, and it was just like a hard hit pop up that didn't really do anything. Because it was a quick game, it was just over 2 hours.
Yeah, it was.
So like partially efficiency. Obviously, you go 9 innings and you're using what, like about 12 pitches an inning,
right? Something like that.
So I mean, like that's pretty damn efficient. Like, yeah, but like. There really wasn't all that much there where I was like, yeah, that's in danger. Like, there was a couple of good plays there, yeah, but like, the most memorable thing from the field for me was, Forbes, when he got, you know, a couple where it's like, okay, yeah, he got his foot stepped on, and did he get plinked?
He got hit by a pitch and got stepped on.
Yeah, it's like, that's rough. Yeah, and then we were saying, like, yeah, does PJ want to take him out because this game's in hand? And he may kill somebody if there's another one that's inside.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and he was playing, by the way. He's playing today, too, so it was great.
Good for him,
right back at it.
Yeah.
Tape it up.
Yeah, I told you, he's going to keep going. He's got winter ball on the horizon. Can't miss that contract. But, yeah, like, I feel like there really wasn't enough fight out of a minor team that really needed to have more fight here. Like I said, man, like your 2-hitter, your 5-hitter, and your 7-hitter. Those were guys that got hits. And of them, those were actually the 3 guys that got on base.
Yeah.
So, not really doing it.
Especially a team that had plenty of fight over the past week.
Yeah. So, it's just a very disappointing outcome. But,
yeah, and that's where I go back to that theory. Maybe, they crossed the finish line in their minds. And, not that they didn't want to win, but that,
they accomplished their goal.
Just the mentality is, it goes from that mentality of like going all in to do everything you need to do. Like every single pitch is a war, to being like, all right, let's step up for this at bat and just kind of ride with it. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but
yeah, right. Well, we'll keep it moving. We'll move on to Evansville-Schaumburg now. A much more competitive game, back and forth the whole way. Quite frankly, Otter bullpen, phenomenal job. really, really quality there. Honestly, the whole Otter team, really quality effort. It's just a matter of, in the case of Schaumburg, at least, it was a matter of they just came up a little bit short. But a really hard fought 4-3 final for Evansville. And that was the kind of series where I would love to see a best of three. Now, granted, Evansville Gateway, as we were talking about a lot earlier on, are going to be a really fun series. Evansville seems to keep pulling out these close games. They have that kind of mentality. So maybe that's enough to drag them through. That's certainly what got Schaumburg to a championship 2 years ago, got them back to a final the year prior. Slight regression every year, not great to see, but even still, in a 50-50 game, you don't win every coin flip. And that's just kind of the way this one went.
Yeah, I am interested. I feel like, you're going to make mistakes in a playoff series, and we've talked a little bit about, like, are those mistakes going to burn you or not, and talking about, like, the base running mistakes and some just, like, messy play. Hey, by the way, that ninth inning was 3 pitches, just so you know, that Tavares ninth inning.
So
crazy.
It's kind of, okay, so I wasn't wrong. I legitimately looked away. I was like,
whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I think he also dropped some velo, and that probably encourages some swings. But anyway, my thought being, when it comes to mistakes, like, they're going to happen, and it's just how they get handled, and by both you and the other team. And they made mistakes today, and they got away with it. And now, where my head's at, okay, is it like, okay, those were the mistakes, and they survived it? Cool. Or is it like, they made mistakes, and they survived this time?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, did they get the mistakes out of the way, or did they get lucky this time and those mistakes are going to cost them now, next time they come up? So that's what I'm interested in. And honestly, I don't know that I've seen this Evansville team in crunch time enough to know. I was genuinely unimpressed by the effort today. I mean, obviously they came up clutch, when it mattered most. And I think they took advantage of some, less than, standard pitching. I don't know. It wasn't. Josh Lucas just did not seem.
He wasn't a good outing for him.
You called it immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, you were like 3 pitches in. I feel like. Well, I was, and you might have been a little further in because Flow Sports.
It was still first at bat. Yeah, it was still first bat.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure what to exactly make of that for him. Hopefully, that's just a blip on the radar. But I think they got. Yeah, I think they basically had this game. They gave it away, and it happened to come back to them. I don't know. I don't think Gateway is a team that's going to lay down and die. I think Evansville's going to have to earn that second win, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do it.
Yeah, I'm going to be very, very interested in seeing what game 2 is like. That's a bigger tell for me, because, like, this game tells me more about Gateway's inability to, stomp on a throat. Like, you gotta give Gateway credit. We're jumping ahead now, because now we're talking Gateway and we're talking Schaumburg at the same time. Like, it goes to the same overarching point. I guess we'll get the other game out of the way, which is just, if you keep surviving, there will reach a point where it's just like, okay, they find ways to win. And that's ultimately what you have to do in the postseason.
That's your identity. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I respect that. But if you keep finding your way into this position, what exactly is the deal here? And, like, it's one thing if you're in that position and you're playing Quebec, you're playing New Jersey, I guess even Gateway, because they're all roughly comparable. Even if, especially when we rank teams, there's a reason why the 1 week ranked every playoff team from the East, but none from the West. There's a reason behind that. It's one thing when you're doing against high quality opponents, because then it's like, okay, well, you're just being overmatched, but you're scrappy and you're finding a way. It's another thing when you're doing against Schaumburg, right? Where it's like, okay, you guys should be equals. You should not, like, yes, you should be in here because it's equal quality, but, like, at the same time, if you're truly the better team, you'll pull away. So, like, I don't want to shade them because, like, they're winning, and it takes something to not get down to fight through the adversity. But at the same time, like, I can't say anything until game 2 of the current series. That's when I'll be able to say, okay, I know what they're about. At that point, they eke out another close game. That's 3 in a row. And that tells me what I need to know, at least for a postseason sample. Also, they'd be going on to the championship round. It's like, okay, well, you just need to find 3 more of these things. So,
I'm kind of of the mindset that's like, if Gateway doesn't show me some offensive life in the first like 3 innings, I might be like, "Ooh, this team might be done." Like, I know that's weird, but like that's kind of where I'm at right now on that.
And I'm noticing only one of the Gateway runs was earned. So that's concerning to me. That it was a 4-1 game on earned runs, which maybe I'm trying to make a mountain out of a molehill here, but like you can't count on unearned runs to be a thing consistently. Like that's,
yeah, I agree.
That you can't do that. Like maybe because we really haven't spent much time looking at West teams just because the East has been so fascinating, but like maybe Evansville's a team that can't field all that well, but even then, like I still don't feel good because I mean, like honestly, some fundamentals were lacking in that Evansville team. They scare me on that because I mean,
yeah,
the pop up in the 8th that we mentioned where Dakota Phillips got it. I hate the fact he caught that with one hand because he was using the other hand to hold his mask. I hate that so much.
There was a play that was between, and I'm going to draw a blank on both the names shortly because it was who was in right?
Jeff Baez.
Yes. Okay. Baez comes in. I think it was Skender just like out there looking lost, like turning back and forth, trying to get a ball over his head. And like Baez literally comes in and just like reaches up over his head, like running full speed by and just snags out of the air. And I was like, that's a great catch. Like, that's a great catch. Surprising athleticism from Baez, but also like, I mean, more often than not, that's not going to end well for you. Like that was little things like that. Like we're working out, but boy, they were on the razor's edge of that going sideways. So
it reminds me of watching the Bulls a lot. Not a great fundamental team at times.
Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, like it's just things like that scare me. It's like at this point in the year, you should know how your teammates play. You should be, and like it's a fundamental thing. It's like you call the ball. It's either you know where it is and you got it and you're calling it, or you have no idea. Like communicate with the guys in the field here. And like going back to the Phillips thing, because that's the one I saw. There's no reason to not just drop your mask and catch the thing 2 hands. Like, you are in such a dangerous spot with the bases loaded and 2 away in a 1-run game right now where you have been gifted an opportunity to end this inning and get out without any other damage. Squeeze the damn ball. Like, I understand it's like such an old head thing, but like, it's such a situation. There's no reason to not do that.
Yeah. No, and I do agree. Entering the series, the projected starters for Evansville came in with a 1.07 ERA against Gateway this year.
Okay, yeah.
Now, and that's, by the way, remember at Gateway, they put up those numbers like early in the season, which was like unreal. Like, I think the whole team had like a OPS above.
Yeah, they were
like,
really strong. Yeah.
Like, 1100. Like, they settled in 842. Yo, like that's a huge drop. Like I know, like it's easy to fall from an 1100 OPS, but like no, like that's like their offense dropped off noticeably throughout that as that season went on. So
yeah, that's
I think it also
28% drop, roughly,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and again, that is partially just reversion to mean, but like that means they were below, for a lot of the year, they were below an 840 OPS. So if you look at Gateway, they had 17 games in May. So we'll count May. That was legit.
Yeah.
They slashed 350, 437, 555, which is silly. That's going to put you right about 1,000 OPS as a team. Then from there, the OPS dropped to a 788 in June, which is, I believe, let me double check that, which is right about league average. Then in July, it was back up to an 834, which is good. That's above league average. And then in August, it was a 780, which is right at league average again. So they have, for large parts, in August, they slashed, oh my God, math is so hard, 770, which is really right at league average. So they have been a league average offense for most of the year at this point in time.
I just think that's worth remembering when we talk about this Gateway team, because they are, if you look at it in most categories, they're the third best offense in the league. But for large stretches of this year, they have been really about the sixth or seventh best offense in the league.
Let's move on to other series because we have other things to do, and I want to try and wrap this up in about 10, 15 minutes. So
yeah,
let's try and get it done in that goal here. But we still have the whole association to get to, and we probably should talk about them because they're the other league doing playoff stuff, and we spend a lot of time at the Frontier. So
yeah, damn.
Fargo Moorhead, Sioux City, probably one of the more competitive games. I will open up by saying the home plate up Neil Turner had a very interesting zone.
Yeah, I did not actually. This game was one of like two I really didn't get eyes on. So you can feel free to fill in the blanks on that a little bit.
So at first I wasn't noticing as much, but I was also I was bouncing between live tweeting it and looking at the other games, but I had that one on, so I was listening to it. And a lot of times you'd hear Jack Michaels, both for and against Fargo, go, and I'll ring him up, and he'll get halfway through, and he strikes him. Oh, no, wait, he called it a ball. And so, then I'd look up at it, either waiting for a replay, or just to see the immediate, body language from the pitcher. And it always was really? That wasn't a strike? Okay. And you notice later on in the game, when you start getting 7, 8, 9, batters was now starting to take offense to a lot of it. They were noticing it a lot. So it was just a very erratic zone. At times, it was kind of hard to judge it because of the way the camera angle was set up for center field. The second base ump, a lot of times, would either block the batter or block a section of the plate. So maybe I wasn't seeing the whole thing. Maybe I wasn't getting the best angle of it. But from when I was getting that angle, it did not seem to be a great strike zone. So I'm not going to say that had a major impact. Both teams had to deal with it. And realistically, only one pitcher really had a problem with it. The major problem being that was Fargo's starter and Kevin McGovern, probably the most reliable pitcher they got, one of the most reliable pitchers in the league. And when he goes out and gives up, about 8 earned, I believe, that's going to be a rough day at the office. So it's going to be hard to recover from that. More than that, what I kind of gathered was Silviano was the only guy I really felt good about coming out of that game from a Fargo perspective. The bullpen did fine. They did their job. I didn't like how much it had to be used, but, you don't always get that luxury. And in a game that's not totally out of hand yet, you use them. So there's great. Silviano
with a day off coming.
Exactly. Yeah. Even if it's a travel day, it's still a day off nonetheless. Silviano provided a lot of offense, returned to the lineup. I think at one point I called it David Wright-esque. His second at bat, he hits a big home run, real momentum swinger. There was also a situation where there was one player for the Explorers who had a big double but missed first base, so they took the runs off the board, and that ended the inning. But they had to play a whole half inning before that got picked up. It was a whole complicated thing. If you go back to the Twitter, I live tweeted the whole thing. It's all down to space. So it was kind of a funky game from that perspective. The long short, the big takeaway I kind of got here was Sioux City made this game closer than it had to be through a lot of unforced errors. I'm going to pull it up now to get the exact number of unearned runs in there, but there was, at the end, it was an 8-6 final, but it was an 8-4 game, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
2 runs
I feel
score.
you.
Yeah, 2 runs score on a passed ball. Chase Harris misses a ball that he had to run a very long way for. It was kind of no man's land, so he was the one that got there, and it kind of hit him in the glove. So, I want you to catch that, but also you had to run a country mile to get there, so I'm not sure what to really expect. Runs came off of that. Stuff like that was where Fargo got offense from, and you get runs where you can in a playoff game, but it goes back to the Evansville point, which is I'm not going to count on unearned runs as the basis of my offense. Yeah, of the 6 runs they got, 5 of them were unearned. That's not winning games. So that's kind of my main takeaway from it. And also, McGovern did give up 8 runs in 4 innings, so that's going to put you down pretty easily.
I will push back slightly on the concern about earned and unearned runs, mainly because I think a lot of errors tend to be arbitrary anyway. Not necessarily these. That's more of a big picture statement. But
I've lately found myself trending more towards like projection purposes, like runs against rather than earned runs, because I think a lot of it is like if you're having a lot of, let me think it through. So basically, a lot of guys are giving up unearned runs, but it's because they are giving up more balls in play and possibly even hard hit balls in play. Which if 1 in 10 calls an issue and you're giving up, over 2 games, possibly 10 extra balls in play than someone else, then you're going to have an extra hit slip through or whatever. But I also think like offensively, it can sometimes mean you got lucky, but other times it just means, you put the ball in play a lot and you put pressure on the defense. So it doesn't necessarily mean, you saw more of the game than I did. So perhaps this was strictly like, no, Ryan, this is a grounder to first that he decided to punt into the crowd, in which case, yeah, obviously. But I would just say, don't entirely, put the asterisk on it just because it's unearned runs. I mean,
what I will say is, just to give more context to it, of those 5 unearned, 2 of them were the pass ball in the 9th. The other 3 were a direct result of the Chase Harris not catching that one. Because that catch wasn't made, it extended the inning, and that then led to, the runs that would come through directly. It was 2 outs. That play was not made. You could directly, make that note. So I will say in that particular instance, it was there. Across the rest of it, yeah, I would say maybe just hard hit balls. But even still, like I'm looking at it and like looking back on it, just what's on the page here. And like, I can count like 4 Red Hawks that had a good game. It's like BJ Lopez, Silviano, perhaps Manny Boss can, and yeah, I guess Pena too. He scored 2 runs and got 2 hits. Everybody else was very unimpressive. And in 9 innings, they struck out 10 times. So not terrible, but also like if every inning you're starting off with 1 strikeout, essentially, like, not putting yourself in a position to win.
Just not how good offenses operate. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and only 12 hits. 1 walk in that too, by the way. So like, what is it, 13 base runners?
Yeah.
So that's not really giving yourself a chance at offense.
Wait, 12 hits?
12 hits with 13 base runners. Like, yeah, it's 1 guy an inning.
You lost me there.
They had 13 total guys on base in the game. 12 of them came by a hit.
I'd argue that's not bad.
I mean, it's base hits. It's 1 guy. They're not advancing anybody.
Yeah, and that's where, you got to have some pop. I guess that's kind of what's costing them there.
To be fair, 9 of the hits came in the first 5 innings. And a lot of them were as a result of the drop. Yeah, 3rd innings where all that goes down. So the rundown on that was base hit by Lopez, put out by Oland, then strikeout by Thomas, and then Pena hit the little kind of dead duck thing that Chase drops. That moves Lopez to 3rd, so now it's 1st and 3rd with 2 away. Silviano comes up, 3-run shot, and then strikeout to end the inning.
I do think it's interesting they had so many hits, but like so little production out of that. That is something that would pique my interest on reasons for concern. Yeah, I mean, they are.
I'll give them credit here. It's a lot of 2-out hits, so they're staying alive, but it's also a lot of like you're backed up against the wall. So you really can't do too much with it, right? Because like if you have a base hit with 2 outs, it's like, okay, well, if we have a 50-50 ball, are you sending them to 3rd where he can make the final out of the inning? Are you going to try to stretch a base hit into a double? Probably not.
No, I follow you there. I don't know. I'm noticing some interesting trends the more I look at the offenses in this. The power doesn't stand out, which is fascinating. Especially when you see the Frontier League teams that have done well and the Atlantic League teams that have done well. I mean, I'm looking at, I would say Fargo, Milwaukee, Kane County, Sioux City all have what I would sort of quantify as, below average power as a lineup. And it's just sort of, it's the first time I'm realizing that. So I'm kind of like looking at it like, damn. Let me see. Yeah, I would say definitely. So Fargo, Milwaukee, King County, Sioux City. Wow. No, sorry, that was not very good podcast audio content. But while you're talking about that, the lack of real production for the number of hits from Fargo, it calls into question, well, what are those hits looking like? And the fact that they're isolated powers below league average, as is half of the playoff teams in the American Association, shows a pretty significant difference between that league and, the other indie league, and literally every other indie league, as far as I can tell. I'm going to have to do a whole thing on that then, because it feels like the way to win the American Association is like completely different than every other league.
Okay. Any event, we'll move from Fargo to Milwaukee because, like I said, we got to keep moving. Milwaukee, Kane County. Good news is this is a blowout, so we really don't have to spend any time on this. It was just all Kane County, and I spent the whole night going, remember Fargo and Sioux Falls, it can be worse, and this was worse. Really quite clinical and surgical precision offensively from Kane County. I mean, they just beat the hell out of them. What was it, 11-2 of the final? And even then, like, the two runs were more like, hey, look, we're taking a cup of water out of this sinking vessel.
Yeah, this was an 8-0 game.
Yeah.
To start, so
it really wasn't. Yeah, Zimmerman did not have a good outing. Rodriguez didn't help any. Really, Peguero was the only reliever that I think really did a great job. On the flip side, though, King County, honestly, great job by everybody on the pitching side. Really quality work. A lot of just one inning, but they did their job. And even Beardsley, gave up 2 runs in 5 innings, but he did his job. That's all I'm really asking. Do your job. And like I said, the whole offense hummed. Ordonez could have been better, 0 for 5 with 2 strikeouts. Not a great look, but, team picked you up. All great there. And same thing with Hector Sanchez. Would like to see it a little bit better. Yeah, so kind of funny. Kane manages 12 hits, more base runners, but 12 hits, they get 11 runs out of it. So funny how that goes.
Yeah, man. That'll play.
Yep. So any major thoughts on Kane?
For the most part, not really. I kind of shared my thoughts on it a little bit on Twitter. Yeah, I don't think Milwaukee's out of it, but boy, was it a tough look. And this is Kane County, I noted before all this started, is a difficult matchup for Milwaukee. I was a little bit surprised that they went with Kane County, honestly. I don't know. I think Kane County, what was that?
It's them or Chicago. You're not taking Cleburne.
Yeah, that's right. So that's one. They weren't going to go to Cleburne.
Especially because Cleburne's going to be like
Chicago, obviously. So yeah, that's right. It was one of those ones where the only option is not a good option, which I found funny because in the other league it was like, I tweeted that though out. I was like, yeah, it's funny how like you're looking for your best possible matchup in the East Division or in the West Division, and the East Division you're just trying to not go to Cleburne. And that's really it, because Milwaukee, I think Cleburne would have been a better matchup for them, but they just did not want to take that trip, and they took King County, and I think it was a gamble. King County lost games this year because they ran to they're not as complete a roster. I think like the far tail end of their pitching staff isn't as good, but the top end is very good. And I don't very highly of their offense, but when you have some guys who can deal and you only need to worry about like the top end pitchers in a playoff series, you can get by with an offense that really isn't lighting the world on fire. And I think Milwaukee is particularly an offense that is susceptible to a pitching staff built that way. And I think they might step into a trap here. I wouldn't be surprised to see them get cleaned out in this next game.
Neither would I. And just the last point before we move on to the next thing. Also keep in mind another strike against the picking Cleburne here. Game 1 would have been in Milwaukee. They forfeited that advantage because of the bananas. So they would have had to go to Cleburne and play 2 games potentially in 100+ degree heat. That's a non-starter.
Bro, I cannot wait to start talking to some of these Milwaukee guys postseason. Yeah. I can't wait to hear how this went. Quickly,
Kansas City, Sioux Falls. Any major thoughts there? A couple of big innings seemed like it did Sioux Falls in. That's pretty much the general consensus. In KC, they look like the team that's going to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So far, I posted the American Association Championship odds today, like after, game 1 of these series. Yeah. And Kansas City
entered with good odds to beat Sioux Falls. In the game itself, it was very much why Kansas City is so difficult, because there were moments where Sioux Falls was able to contain them, but when they couldn't, Kansas City got to them and beat them badly, and then Sioux Falls just could not get enough, string together enough hits or walks or whatever they need to do to keep guys moving around the base paths and get some runs in. It's hard to get Kansas City on the back foot for an extended period of time so that you can get momentum going. I think they let off the gas a little bit, and the end of the regular season, we saw them sort of soften a little, but I think it was definitely so they could load up and be all in every inning. And I think we're seeing what that looks like. I think Sioux Falls is certainly lesser competition. I think it's good that they're in the playoffs, but I think, I want them to keep striving towards success here. I think they're on the right track, but this is a tough matchup for them.
It's a step in the plan.
Yeah, as it sits, they are the least likely of the four teams that lost game one to find a way to come back. They have basically a 19% chance to find their way out of this round. That's the worst of any of the 8 teams. And with that, Kansas City has the best odds, obviously, to make it out of the first round, but they also have the best odds to make it out of the second round. They have 43% chance to make the championship, and they have a basically 24% chance to win the championship at this rate, which is crazy to think. In an 18 tournament, they have a 1 in 4 shot, basically, based on the probability there. So, Kansas City's gross. They're a great team. They're built for that. That is the type of team that saw early on we're going to be in the playoffs, and we're going to make sure we really fine tune the edges of this roster so the whole thing is built for this chase. So they could be very fun to watch.
It's an organization led by a guy that very much took last year's loss to Fargo to heart and said, not again. We're going back to winning. We really like that. And did exactly that. And I feel like the best way of just kind of summarizing it in lay terms is Kansas City allowed 1 run, scored 9, and it took them 2.5 hours to finish that game.
Yeah.
There was 10 runs scored.
Yeah. At no point did that feel like there was
danger.
Hope. Not to
degrade the Canaries, but you're going up against the behemoth.
Boy,
have fun.
It's something else.
Yeah.
So, that's how I'm feeling as well. This, they might not win it, but it's going to be a very fun team to watch, because I love watching a team that's built specifically for the pursuit they're on, which I think is a fair way to describe this team right now.
Absolutely. Last series to really get to, Cleburne, Chicago. Honestly, best of the games in the American Association, back and forth pretty much the whole way. Overall, Cleburne kind of outlasts them. I know it's stupid, but I kind of chalk it up to the travel and being used to the heat more, which could be a thing. It may also just be Cleburne outlasted them. Dog's Pen needs to be better overall. And realistically, this could just be a case of that was Cleburne at their best, and it was clearly Chicago not at theirs. So I definitely feel like Chicago can come back in this. That wasn't their best effort, but they need to get it sorted out quickly when they get back to Rosemont.
I agree. I'm just looking. Damn, bro. It was I was so hot. It was so hot in that game. That is so silly. It was 96 degrees. It was 6 o'clock at night. What the hell?
Yeah. That's why I genuinely mean that he had an effect.
Yeah. They said on Twitter, Cleburne they're not wrong. It's probably the biggest home field advantage in all of, between the bus ride / plane, and the weather. I think it's the biggest home field advantage in all of, Indy Ball, maybe other than Hinchliff, the way that Jersey team is built right now. But I don't know. You're right in this. So basically, of the teams that won game one, Cleburne has the lowest odds to advance. It's still seeing a 70% chance to make it. They're also the ones who will see the biggest flip in probability if Chicago comes back and wins game two. I think Cleburne's a team that will do their best work when things are going according to plan, if that makes sense. They don't have the roster flexibility. They don't have the depth that it takes to
stay on script, go
to plan B and plan C. They have to get plan A to work, or else they could have a very long day, and very long days create, a long tomorrow as well. And that's where I think they could easily get eaten up. So I do think Cleburne, I got to favor them the rest of the way here because obviously they just need to win one more, but I think they're walking a tightrope, man. And if they make it to the next round, I think they're going to have they might have a tough go.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Which, just one last stat on them before we wrap it. Chicago did not have a single earned run. Cleburne, all 7 of theirs were earned. The only 4 runs that Cleburne gave up were all unearned, for whatever that is worth. Last 2 points to get to wrap this up, hopefully within 5 minutes, even though we're terrible at this. Playoff outlook real quick. Atlantic League, who's really in? We know it's going to be Gastonia at this point. Obviously, Long Island and High Point are in. That just leaves the north spot. Who are we looking at there? Is it Lancaster, or is it going to be someone else that steals it?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Lancaster's issue is they don't have tiebreakers right now. Southern Maryland owns the tiebreaker on them. They entered the night a game behind them. That's going to complicate some things. York has been charging back. They basically look like a completely dead team a week and a half ago. Yeah. They came flying back up.
3 right
now.
We
dropped them from like the top 4 to out of the top 10 ranking. And then the next week we put them back in the top 4, I think. Yeah. So that's like how aggressive their up and down's been. But, I think they're a team that's pretty driven they came so close to winning the first half. I could see them really finding a way to follow through, especially if they're starting to hit their rhythm. Again, new manager, as that continues to play out, maybe they're settling in there. Southern Maryland did gain a half game on Lancaster tonight, so they are now just a half game back.
W5 too. W5.
Yeah, man.
They're getting a stride. Daryl Thompson back too. He looks back to himself.
Yeah, I am excited about the North Division race because, first of all, Gastonia tonight set the new league record for home runs. So shout out to Gastonia for that.
Good for them.
206 now. But I think the South is kind of sealed away. It's pretty straightforward. Either way, with High Point or Gastonia close that out, I think Gastonia is far enough ahead where they're going to make it in on the wild card. Like either they are going to win the division or High Point's going to win the division, opening the wild card for Gastonia because I think they clinched it. Did they clinch today? They did clinch today with York losing. So yeah, they have the wild card now. So that's not interesting. The North though is a whole different can of worms. Southern Maryland a half game behind Lancaster. Southern Maryland is absolutely becoming the team that they are used to being. Very familiar. Good back end of the bullpen. Good starting rotation. Getting timely hitting. Lancaster is that team that we expect to see as well. They're a second half team. They're pushing. York has sort of regained their form from earlier in the season. So basically all these teams in contention right now are like exactly who they're built to be at the same time. So I'm so excited about these last 9 games we have left in the Atlantic League North because they're going to be a hell of a lot of fun.
All right, cool. We'll talk more about it next week when we have the time to do it. Last playoff outlook point, Pioneer League, that's pretty much set. We know the Vibes clinched. We know Missoula's in. We know Ogden's in, even though they look like garbage right now. That leaves one spot left, which could either be Billings' spot or it could be Glacier's spot, essentially. The half systems got that all screwed up. Normally, I'd say let's take 10 minutes and talk about it, but that's too much time to take on it. Give me 30 seconds on why the 2 half system sucks and why it encourages Glacier right now to lay down and die to make the playoffs.
Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with the situation, 2 half system, just like in the Atlantic League and the Pioneer League, if you win either half for your division, the first half or the second half, you get a playoff spot. If the same team wins the division twice, then it goes to a wildcard team, which is the team in either division with the best overall record who has not obviously already won a division and clinched the playoff spot. In the Pioneer League, that is far and away the wildcard winner is Glacier. They've already clinched it. They clinched it a while ago. However, Glacier's in a spot where they cannot win the division. They're too far back. Billings is leading the division by entering today a half game over Missoula. Mm-hmm. So the situation that presents itself is Glacier is in if there is a wild card team. The wild card already Rocky Mountains clinched in the south, so there will not be a wild card from there. So what Glacier needs is Missoula to win the second half just like they won the first half. because if Billings wins, it eliminates the wild card and knocks Glacier out. Glacier needs Missoula to win and is playing Missoula to end the season here. That is why it's an issue, because they basically want they want their opponent to win the division in order to create a wild card spot for them. Now they're incentivized to lose, and it's just not great. Look, I don't know that that's how they're going about things. Like, let's be honest, like, you guys still need their numbers, right? So you're asking guys to take a hit if that's what you're doing. So I don't think that, but like, if they go down 5-1, it's unlikely they're going to push hard. That said, tonight they entered the ninth inning down 8-3 and lost 8-6. Glacier, guys, what?
Like, as a unit, boys, that's not what we want right now.
Literally, the tying run was the winning run was at the plate. Guys, what are we doing?
Boys, we're losing playoff revenue.
Yeah,
you boys ain't seeing it, but hey,
Daddy needs the extra home game.
This is a new franchise, boys. When you get off the ground.
Yeah, but with that, by the way, Missoula has now taken that half-game lead back in the North Division. So we see, the gross incentives. And let's look. Okay, so there's that. But now, if you're Billings, how do you feel? Sure, Billings has to handle their business, which they did not against Northern Colorado tonight. But like, if you're Billings, you're like, so we're competing with a team that is actively, like, you're competing with Missoula to get in the playoffs, while Missoula plays a team that is incentivized to lose. Like,
you're playing the dude that's counting cards.
Bad. Yeah, it's bad. So again, it seems as if Glacier is working hard to win. Kudos to them for that. This was 2-half system is bad, essentially. Yeah. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, I'll back it and just go, I hate the 2-half system. Complained about it before, won't do it again, but it's situations like this, however rare they may be, I hate things that go against the spirit of competitiveness, especially in independent ball, where that's part of the draw is we're trying to win. And so when you put them in a situation where it's like, look, you could play more games if you just lose like 2 or 3 of these babies. It spits in the face of competitiveness. And obviously, like, I don't know if a dude that is, I don't think it's that much of an exaggeration to say fighting for their baseball life is going to lay down and die. But like, still, to have a system that incentivizes you to do that, it sucks. It shouldn't be. It's one thing if it happens by mistake. It's another thing when it happens like, yeah, this is a very real part of the design. It just, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about, how Indy Ball is viewed from the outside, but also like with your devoted fans, the ones who do care and they do show up to like for playoff races, and they want you to, like, they're invested in the team and the success of the team. It also, quirkiness is part of what makes Indy Ball great, but this is something that like looks at their, like, the investment they make in time and energy into, the team, and kind of makes, that's not, when you feel like I would look at that and be like, it feels dumb. Like, it feels dumb they invested this time and energy. It feels like they're not taking this seriously, like, as a league and as a product. It feels
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, and you're like look, maybe there's not a lot of options in some of these markets out there, but like, I would be more likely to be like, hey, I'm a little turned off by that now.
Yeah.
All it takes is making somebody feel dumb once. People don't like that.
Yeah, that or making it feel like, what's the point in all this? If it's pointless, what am I doing here? That said, let's get to the props and predictions real quick and then get out of here. 3 predictions. Evansville wins the West. I wrote that down way before we saw that adventure in the 8th and 9th. So I don't love my own prediction there anymore, but it's too late for me to figure out a new one. So we're running with that. I'm thinking we have all sweeps in the Frontier. Man, I really wish I didn't write this down before that Evansville game. And I have the Vibes are playing for a championship next week. I feel like the Vibes are going to get through Ogden fairly easily.
I think they might murk Ogden. Yeah, dude. That feels like a bad vibe right there. Well, it's a good vibe if you're the Vibes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, the Vibes get knocked out. Bad Vibes is the title of the episode, though.
Oh, yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So first of all, I think vibes. Yeah, I'm
Vibes
definitely there with that one.
They're a lock.
That's
Lock them in.
Yeah. What was the other one? Evansville.
Evansville wins the West, so they go ahead. They beat Gateway in their series, and then essentially Quebec and the other series are both done via sweeps. So whoever wins game 1 wins game 2.
Mm-hmm.
That one's gutsier, I will admit.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I gotta. Just the safe money says Evansville. I gotta go Evansville. I didn't see anything that really. They're pitching against Gateway. We can talk about them being shaky in the field all we want or whatever, but like their pitching against Gateway is just stellar. It seems to be a matchup issue for Gateway. So until they prove they can hit their starters, then I'm going to go Evansville.
All right. The two props here. The Jackals hit 6.5 home runs over this playoff run. So that'll include the wild card, divisional series, and if applicable, the championship series. I believe that's a max of 9 games. At most, a minimum of 3 games.
Yeah, I think if they...
I think they have 1 or 2 already. I think 1 right now.
Yeah, they hit 1 when we were there, right?
Yeah, right after we were saying, like, yeah, what Keon Barnum, and then he just sent one into the night sky.
Oh, my God, that's right.
The timing on that was phenomenal.
No, I think it was it Nelson? No. Was it Keon?
Yeah, it was Keon, right? Because we were talking about...
What do I know?
Yeah.
Damn, that's a tough one. I think...
Because if they get through to the next round, I feel good about it. Because they're good for a home run game. That's the thing.
Yeah, Quebec doesn't give up a ton. That's the other thing.
Yeah. But also,
that's so tough. I don't know. I know I just need to make a pick so we can move on. I got.
Keep in mind, if they get to the final 2, look at what pitching staffs they have.
Right.
They could really take advantage, especially if we get the garbage time in the game.
But I don't like...
The question is, do they take 2 of 3 versus Quebec? Which is the real tough one here.
I think they might. I feel weird for some reason. I feel like I believe in them more after this rain delay. I don't push me on it. That's the way I'm thinking. I'm going to say yes, they get it done. Hell yeah. No one always bet on homers.
Okay, so taking the over. All right.
Yeah.
Second and final one. There will be 2.5 extra inning games before the next time we record. That's across all the playoffs. We're just saying in playoffs.
Next time we record. Just in the playoffs. So.
Yeah. So that's between Pioneer, Frontier, and American Association.
2.5. So
2.5. You need 3.
I don't think we see 3 or more. I think we see 2 or less.
Okay.
2 or fewer. Whatever.
All right. For the record, I'm taking the under on both of them. So.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I see. The problem is I believe in Quebec more. So.
I do too. I'm going against. But every time I look back, I liked Jersey more. I don't know why. They just grow on me, man. Because you know what I do? I go, Quebec, and then I look at that lineup and I go,
See, but the thing is, I look at Quebec and I go, they just have such a track record of winning. They always win. That's the problem. They find a way. They can win close games. They can win blowouts. They can win pitching games. They can win batting games. They can win in so many different ways. That's like, like I understand the Jackals have gotten better pitching wise throughout the year and they've looked pretty good, but like, I just don't, I think if push comes to shove and they have to win 2 games out of 3 that are pitchers duels, I don't think they can do that.
Well, yeah, and we have to keep in mind now they're into their bullpen in the 5th inning here.
Yeah, and also
they do not have that kind of bullpen. That's just not what they're built for.
And they play the next day and possibly the day after that.
Yeah, with a bus ride. Yeah.
So that's stretching thin.
That is, actually now I'm feeling less confident. So, oh well, we're in it now.
Yeah.
Life's a nightmare.
Yeah, right. So that's all we got there. Next week, we're going to do a fancy little thing that we're going to do this week. Ran out of time for it. We'll get into it next week.
Classic.
Yep. This was long even for our standards. Not great.
Sorry.
Yeah. It is what
No,
it is.
baseball, man. Got a lot to talk about.
Exactly. Like there was like
Got into the actual games, man. If you want us to talk ball, like talk ball.
That's the thing. Like there was 2 hours of just talking ball in this, and like an hour of solid news.
Sorry for partying.
Yeah, it was just like a really long week. So there's that. Yeah. What, Indy Ball Nation and everything, right?
Yeah, Indy Ball Nation.
All right, cool.
There you go.
Indy Ball Report on most, Indy Ball Pod on the one other thing. I will leave off with one thing before the usual sign off. To bring us full circle in the Zach Bryan news, I saw one tweet that is phenomenal, which is, what if Zach Bryan was the something in the orange all along?
What if the something in the orange was the friends we made along the way?
It very well could have been. It could have been. And on that note, don't forget to play ball.